Good evening, board members and residents. I'd like to call to order our regular meeting for Monday, July 11th, 2022, and I'd ask that everyone present please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Witt, will you please take the roll call?
Yes, Mr. Batkins. Here. Mr. Brado. Here. Mr. Olgiati. Here. Mrs. Rose.
Here.
Mr. Tominello.
Here.
Mr. Witt. Here. Mr. Verpest.
Here. Thank you. Next on our agenda is the approval of the consent agenda, including approval of the regular board meeting minutes for June 27th, 2022, and approval of the bills in the amount of $794,282.23. I'd be looking for a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
So moved.
All right, is there support?
Support.
So we've got a motion by Mr. Badkins with support by Mr. Olgiati. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none and seeing no public comment, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carries. Next on the agenda is the approval of the regular agenda. Board members, I'm not aware of any changes, so unless there are any changes, I'd be looking for a motion to accept the agenda or approve the agenda as presented.
I'll make that motion.
All right, is there support?
Support.
And a motion by Mrs. Rose with support by Mr. Brado. Any discussion? Hearing none and seeing no public comment, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carries. Thank you. Next is announcements. I have some announcements, and then I'll see if there's any others. Our Harrison Township Library has 3 reading programs this summer. The first is for children in grades K through 5. The second is for teens in grades 6 through 12. And the third reading program is for adults. The more you read, the more raffle tickets you earn. The prizes for the children and teens are gift baskets, and the adults will have a chance to win a sunset sailing cruise for 2 on Lake St. Clair from the Lake St. Clair Sailing Club. The library is hosting a special officer from the Macomb County Sheriff's Department. A K-9 unit will be on site to help teach about the police dog program July 15th at 1 p.m. There will also be police dog demonstrations to show what these special officers can do. Our Harrison Township Fire Department is also coming to the library. Mark your calendars for August 12th for a fun story time and demonstrations by our fire department. A fire truck will be on location so that the children present can explore the fire truck after the demonstrations. For more information on these and other great community events, you can visit their website at htlibrary.org. Call them 586-329-1261 or email them at librarian@htlibrary.org. Our Harrison Township Beautification Commission would like to invite you to their Inspirations Garden Tour coming up Saturday, July 23rd from 9 a.m. until 4 p.m. Tickets can be purchased at the Harrison Township offices. You can find out more information about that garden tour on our website. The Parade of Lights on the Clinton River is scheduled for Saturday, August 6th. Boats will start lining up at 9 p.m. before the journey along the river. More information can be found at jobbycrew.com or contacting Lambrecht Marine. The Harrison Township Fire Department currently has an open eligibility list. If you would like the chance to become part of our elite rescue team, you can visit the fire department section of our website. The Parks and Rec Committee will be hosting another free concert at Waterfront Park July 21st from 6:30 until 9 p.m. as part of a concert at the park series. Light snacks and refreshments will be sold. Our second concert features the band Rocksteady. The Harrison Township Senior Center hosts a monthly casino trip on the last Friday of every month. Space is limited for these trips, so please call for details and registration. The Senior Center also features chair yoga on Tuesdays and Fridays at 1 p.m. for seniors to increase their strength and flexibility, as well as an aerobics strength class Mondays at 1 p.m. The Senior Center also hosts bingo every Wednesday at noon and euchre every Thursday at noon. For more information on times and events, please call our coordinator Jen at the Senior Center, 586-466-1497. For more information on these, as well as all other township events, you can always call the supervisor's office, 586-466-1445. Visit our website, harrison-township.org, or follow us on Twitter at HarrisonTWPMI. Are there any other announcements?
I just wanted to give the board a quick update on the scanning project that the board authorized. A few months ago, the board approved up to $30,000 to scan our large format plans and blueprints. Everything that we've shipped out has been completed. We were able to come in at $22,000, give or take, for the entire amount of documents that we had. The building department's still working on a few, but they had taken on a lot to do themselves, so they're able to keep the costs low. And now we're going to be working with some of the department heads to sort of see where we want to move next in digitizing our records. So just an update on something that we're doing.
That's great news. That's a big project.
Yep.
What's the disposal method for the hard copies now?
Before we dispose of it, we're working on a policy for this board to approve to sort of govern that transition to digitizing records, so that way there's a standard practice as we move through it.
Okay.
So for now, there's no destruction?
Yeah, they're returning everything, and then we can dispose of it once that policy is in place.
Okay. Any other information, updates? Engines and eats, or is that still a little ways off?
Oh, there you go, August 6th,
August 6th.
during the day,
Yeah.
11 to 3-ish.
And then you can go to the
11 to 3?
parade of lights afterwards.
There you go, yeah, you hit one and go, okay. Engines, eats, and lights.
Yep.
All right, good. I do have one addition to my announcements. You may recall that when Chief Bostater brought the last firefighter candidate, probationary firefighter, he had said he had asked for actually 2. So we had 1 retirement, which took us to 26. He hired 1 more firefighter, which brought us to 27. And because we anticipate another retirement in the very near future, he said he would like to hire a 28th firefighter and get that person in the works. So I know that you received this email, but as a matter of public record, candidate Andrew Caldwell was offered the position of probationary firefighter, and he has accepted that. He's anticipated to start with our department August 8th. It is a 1-year probationary period for the firefighters, so still have to go through that process. But so far, he's met all the requirements. There's still some background investigations, psychological, physical evaluations. But just wanted to make it a matter of public record that the 28th probationary firefighter, Andrew Caldwell, is expected to start with our department August 8th. Any other announcements? Hearing none, we'll move on our agenda. We have, item D1 next, regarding zoning board of appeals board members. Currently, we have a ZBA member, Mr. Len Gallo. He has served on our ZBA since 2017. He recently indicated that due to other commitments, he would like to step down from that role. Mr. Shane Gleason has expressed an interest in serving as a ZBA member. He and his family have lived in Harrison Township for several years, and he has served in other appointed roles in St. Clair Shores, which was the prior community that his family lived in. I am recommending that we accept the resignation of Mr. Len Gallo from our ZBA and appoint Mr. Shane Gleason to fill the remainder of his term to expire December 20th, 2023, and appoint Mr. Len Gallo as a ZBA alternate for a term to expire December 20, 2023.
Make a motion to accept the resignation of Mr. Len Gallo from the ZBA and appoint Mr. Shane Gleason to the ZBA to fill the remainder of the term to expire December 20th, 2023, and appoint Mr. Len Gallo as a ZBA alternate for a term to expire December 20th, 2023.
Support.
All right, we've got a motion by Mr. Witt with support by Mr. Brado. Any discussion on the appointment and acceptance of resignation?
Will he be attending his first meeting tomorrow?
I don't think that we would put him up that quick. That's a good question. I hadn't really thought about that when I drafted this, but we're on that cusp. But I had not I had not anticipated that, so I,
We'll make sure Sabrina gets the information in the morning
Yeah.
and.
yeah,
and
but it
reach
would
out
be
to 'em.
unfair to put somebody on the
Well,
spot
we
for
just
that.
have, I'm asking because we have 2 cases tomorrow night,
Yeah,
so.
yeah, I don't think, it'd be tough to say, you're gonna
Yeah.
show up and you haven't had really a chance to do any groundwork. So I hadn't really considered that when I put this on the agenda, but at this point, I would imagine that Sabrina's contacted the regular board members, and certainly if Mr. Lengallo is an alternate and he indicated he could be there, then it's really, doesn't really change the outcome.
I do have a question.
Yeah.
How do we know that Mr. Shane Gleason expressed an interest? How did he find out there was an opening on the board? Like, was he involved in something else in the district, or?
Yeah, no, so as from time to time, we'll advertise on our website and we'll announce at a board meeting that we
Okay.
have openings on boards and commissions. Mr. Gleason emailed me, it may have been prior to COVID, but it was as far back as like 2020.
Yeah.
Wow.
And
Wow.
then applications from
Application.
October 2020.
Okay,
That's
there you
the
go. I knew it was 2020, I didn't know if it was pre or post-COVID. And so, say, well, hey, that's great, thanks, I'm glad for your interest. But if I don't have an opening, then I'm really not gonna propose him for appointment. What I did is, once Mr. Gallo expressed to me that his travel arrangements are making it tougher to attend, I invited Mr. Gleason to come and meet with me, and I interviewed him because it's, you want to have somebody that's good, and, sometimes people can have a really nice resume and they don't interview well, or vice versa. He's in the banking industry and he seemed like a good fit, so
Alright.
we'll give him a shot and see how he does for the balance of this term, and if he does well, we can reappoint him.
I think you.
Okay. Any other discussion? Hearing none and seeing no public comment, we have a motion by Mr. Witt with support by Mr. Brado for this appointment. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carries. Thank you, Board. Next on our agenda, item E from the Supervisor's Office. E1 is a Facilities Subcommittee recommendation. Board members, earlier this year, the board appointed Mr. Olgiati, Mr. Badkins, and myself to a Facilities Subcommittee with the goal of evaluating our campus and ultimately bringing a recommendation back to the board. We've met several times, and we've also met with Wakely and Associates, an architectural firm. Specifically, one of the representatives from Wakely is a Harrison Township resident, and he had expressed an interest in helping us with this, again, going back probably maybe as far as pre-COVID. So we explained to them what we were hoping to accomplish. They provided an initial proposal for their service. We reviewed that proposal, met with them again, and kind of tried to tweak that, maybe reduce the scope of work, and in so doing, maybe reduce the cost. They are offering to perform a complete evaluation of our current campus and maybe something less detailed to explore the other 2 options that we discussed. So one of those secondary options would be redesigning the current campus with a long-term vision. The second option would be exploring the option of relocating our facilities to Tucker Park. Their proposal came in at a range of $26,000 to $29,000. The analysis of this facility is something, I guess, from reviewing their proposal, something that would be more detailed, something looking at, what are things that we should do if we choose to stay at this campus to bring it up to maybe certain code compliance. Maybe looking at HVAC systems. I won't go into details, but there have been a handful of things that we've asked our service providers to patch instead of replace, because we're not really sure if the goal is to stay here long-term. So I would say that first proposal is probably to look at what does it take for us to stay here a minimum of 20 years? What would it take to take existing systems? We know we've got some leaking in some of the roofs, things like that. And we need to know what that cost is. The second option would be to say, what would it look like if we took our current campus and reconfigured it with a longer-term goal, maybe something that would satisfy a 50-year time span, and looking into the future. And then the third option would be, what does it look like if we were to completely relocate our campus? I don't believe I could ask this board to vote on any one of those 3 decisions until we have some idea of the cost. And we simply don't have staff members that have those qualifications or that skill set. Some of you might remember, we did take a thumbnail, maybe, I don't know if that's not the right word, but kind of maybe a more rudimentary look at this when we had the opportunity to potentially acquire the administration building. So we looked at, all right, what would a parking lot be? What would a roof be? What would it cost to demolish this property? So when we're done, if the board chooses to go in this direction, we can say to stay here is going to cost us this much and it gets us this far down the road. To improve this campus on a longer term basis, this is hypothetical, but maybe we don't need this particular building as our boardroom. Maybe we take a look at the original building, which dates back to about 1950. Maybe that building goes and we add on to the engineering building and put a parking lot on that side and give more space in this area of the campus for the library. What does that cost? And what are the benefits of that? And then, of course, the third option would be to say, and again, because I don't know, is it cheaper to completely abandon the facility, sell the property, and relocate to Tucker Park? So after reviewing this is kind of what we believe is the cost to perform these studies. I don't know that if we were to go with option A, that we would really need to engage with an architect. And option A is probably hiring a contractor for HVAC if they recommend, hey, you should upgrade this HVAC, or hiring a contractor to replace the roof. But if we did decide to go with options B or C, Wakely and Associates has indicated that they would offer some discount because they've already done some of the work. And some of you might recall from engaging with a prior architect, they're all generally pretty similar in their price structure. They oftentimes provide their architectural services for a percentage of the total cost of the project. So whoever we choose, if we went with B or C, we're going to get a discount based on that. But they don't seem to vary much in their fee structure.
Some are just more, like Wakely is more qualified to work on government buildings.
They do more.
School systems, things like that,
Yep.
than other types of architects.
There you go. So, although I put this on under the supervisor's office, I'm going to look to Mr. Olgiati and Mr. Badkins, for maybe to say a few words. In other words, this was kind of like collectively the three of us reviewed this, and I think it was pretty unanimous that we felt this was the recommendation of how to proceed with this project. But I'll leave that up to them to comment.
Me first?
Whoever, yeah,
Okay,
that's
yeah.
fine.
After reviewing and having the meetings with Wakely and Associates, my feelings about it is we would not be doing ourselves justice if we didn't look at all different opportunities that we have to make either this campus better, repair this campus, or build over on Tucker Park. I think Brian, myself, and Ken sat down and we tried to come up with a reasonable proposal for the board, kind of high end and low end, and kind of put things together and give everybody as much information as they need to go forward. I don't feel that we would be doing the community or people that in the community or the people that work at the township office justice by not at least exploring all the opportunities that are available right now. I mean, we talked about a lot of different things. We could sit here and talk to midnight about all the things that we spoke about, but I just think that the best thing for us to do is to at least kind of get an idea of what we want to do going forward into the future, at least have some sort of a game plan, even if it doesn't happen for 4 or 5 or 6 years. I just think that's the prudent thing to do. Brian?
Yeah, I feel the same way. We did talk in general terms of cost of new constructions through the roof right now, So looking at a short-term fixed 10 to 20-year type option, you start looking at windows and just everything that these buildings need. Eventually, something's going to have to come down and go up where it stands, or somewhere else on this facility or somewhere else in the township. But yeah, I think we all agreed that with the state of the economy and everything, we have to look at all the options. And knowing what the options are will help us make a better decision, in my opinion. I think that, my gut tells me what's going to be the most cost effective for the short term, the 10 to 20 year fix. But I think there's been a lot of this, I'll use the proverbial term, kick the can down the road. Eventually, something's gonna have to happen, whether it's here or another area inside the township, it's gonna have to happen. I mean, these buildings built in the 50s were built for 60 years. You know, now, we've put a lot of Band-Aids on. We've got roof issues in almost every building that we own. So I think the study is something that we should do, whether it's something that this board acts on or we give information to the people that are replacing us, whenever that happens. I think the information needs to be out there, the study needs to be passed on. Here's the numbers we had back in 2022, and in the last 2 years, construction has gone up 40%. So these numbers are, really what you'll be looking at is scopes of work, and the pricing will be adjusted according to, do you have people to do it? I mean, we struggle as a community to get 3 bids on a lot of things we put out these days, and, you know, it's just something that I believe has to happen, whether it happens in the next 2 years or the next 5 years, something has to happen. So just my 2 cents.
And so, let's just say that there are things that we cannot ignore when we talk about the roof over the library. It has significant leaking issues. We have, you know, units that need to be serviced on an annual basis because they've exceeded their life. So there's a certain amount of money that we're going to have to spend in the next 6 to 12 months. Before I ask this board to say, make a significant investment in this facility just to get us potentially 10, 20 years down the road, we should know what that cost looks like in comparison. So if we said, hey, to stay here it costs us 200 grand, to leave costs us 5 million, well, probably not a good idea to look at the $5 million option at this point. But if staying here costs us 800,000 and moving costs us $1 million, and we have a facility that lasts longer, that's great. I don't think either of those are the scenario, but until you know what those numbers are, I don't think I can ask you to make a decision to spend, I'm sure, a minimum of 6 figures to stay here. And so the idea is to say, let's analyze it, let's take a look at it, and then take a professional, you know, report back to the board and make a decision on how to spend the money.
One other thing I would like to add too is, like, after our last meeting, I'm standing in the parking lot, I'm looking around and going, well, this is a totally residential area. I mean, a developer could come in here and they could tear this property down and they could build houses here, which would fit into the scope of the neighborhood and the zoning. Not only would you be able to recoup some money from the sale of the property, but you would also be able to collect property taxes on the new houses that are being built. So that's just another option. We don't have acquisition fees on property over on Tucker or Ballard if we decided to go in that direction. But this would still give us a nice little nest egg, you know, to put towards a new building or something else.
And again, that would be a part of this whole thing, yeah. It's important to understand, and just for the board's reference, when we met with Wakely, they said they didn't really propose and weren't comfortable in giving us property values for the existing facility. But in the past, when we've had that need, we've turned to the assessing department, and obviously it's a snapshot, but they might be able to say, based on comparables in the neighborhood, a vacant lot of this much acreage would sell for this much, this property could be divided up accordingly. So part of that analysis for options B and C would be to say, well, what's demolition costs and what would the land be worth? So what is the net value of this parcel that we exist, or these parcels that we currently exist on? And again, you know, if it was worth $1 million and it would pay for the construction of a new building, that'd be great. I don't think that's the case, but it's somewhere in between. So the answer, I don't believe the result of this is going to be a really black and white obvious answer. It's going to be, you know, we've got a couple different ways we can go, but I just don't feel like I could ask this board to make that decision without having an idea on the numbers. So for those reasons, my recommendation is listed, is to engage Wakely and Associates to provide facilities evaluation and planning services at a cost not to exceed $29,000. Is there more discussion, or is there a motion?
I have a discussion just because it seems pretty standard. I know, as Mr. Brado said, and I'm familiar with Wakely from working at the schools, but were we supposed to try to get 3 bids for something like this?
That's up to this board. When we talked as a subcommittee, you know, we felt that they're kind of giving us a breakdown of their costs. Things are pretty competitive right now.
Okay.
If it was this board's will, I have no problem reaching out. We had a working relationship with Partners in Architecture to, you know, that would be one that we worked with. Talking to Wakely has nothing to do, good or bad, with our relationship with Partners in Architecture. And that's a reasonable outcome. That's not a bad question. So if the board said, hey, you know, before we're gonna spend this kind of money, I'd like to see what another firm might offer. I'm confident that Partners would give us a proposal or a letter stating that their fee structure would be similar, or if that wasn't the case, to say, no, this is a completely different thing. But when we evaluated architects for the police mini station, we did kind of more of an evaluation based on qualifications as opposed to saying who's the lowest bidder. So if you said, hey, I'm getting, you know, I'm getting my patio power washed, probably low bidder's good. If I'm getting brain surgery, I might not necessarily want the low bidder. Somewhere between brain surgery and power washing, you know, would fall architectural services. But if the board's uncomfortable with moving forward without some alternative costs, I'm okay with that. Having said that, I'm comfortable that we're in the range of what we're going to get across the board with these firms. They do this work pretty consistently. So.
All right, thank you.
Any other discussion, or is there a motion? Or?
I'll make a motion to engage Wakely and Associates, provide a facility evaluation planning service at a cost not to exceed $29,000.
All right, is there support?
I'll support that motion.
All right, good. Is there further discussion? We've had a fair amount.
Yeah, I think our conversation with Wakely at the time was all of this recommendation, and I don't want to say pre-engineering, is information that's coming to us. So if we decide to go option 1, 2, or 3, we have that information. At that point, we can look for competitive bids on all the engineering, right? So that's an option. Not saying we would exercise it, that would be not, we're getting this data in-house. So that's, I'm the guy that preaches the 3, you know, I like the 3 proposals. I know what it's like to try and get an architect to even look at anything today based on the work that I do. But it's not to say they're not out there. I'm just saying it's very difficult, at least in my experiences.
I will say also that Wakely wasn't trying to jam anything down our throats. I mean, they kind of had the attitude where, you know, we're super, super, super busy, and if we can help you out and we can do something for you, we're more than happy to do that. But as if you don't want us to do it for you, then they're not going to lose any sleep over it, let's put it that way. So I think we're at the mercy of basically the economy right now in different sectors. And I didn't get the feeling of any type of pressure from them whatsoever. I do agree with the situation where you should have 3 bids on a lot of things, but I don't know if there's 3 companies right now that are going to rush to the table to give us 3 bids on this. That's the whole thing, without hanging it up for an exceptionally long period of time.
Okay. Any other board comment? So I see that there's public comment, so if it's all right with the board, we'll open the floor for public comment.
C. William Barriall, 25-year resident, clean cook, do-gooder boy next door, clean up, fix up, people helping people. I see you want to have, I came in here a little late, finishing my blueberries. I see you want to have a new facilities. We got 2.5 years off on the election cycle for you guys and your hand-picked board. And I see you want to spend money. We got 8 square miles of usable township, and you want to build a new facility. Just like I said, we got 8 usable square miles. We got Selfridge, we got the beach, and we got wetlands. And so you're gonna tear down this building and spend some more money. So I guess this is what you've been planning all along with your hand-picked board of Republicans. And I know
it's the first guy that was all for selling this land and gets all the free stuff he wants for his place of business, his additions and, you know, the canopies that end up being usable dining space. I notice all this stuff going on. And I see it happening over and over and over again in the township. So there's nothing new on this. So I guess you're gonna try to go and get a new facility now, again, like you tried to do last time. We got 8 usable square miles of Harrison Township. Again, we got the beach, we got Selfridge, we have a small town here, so you want to tear all this down and build a brand new facility for yourselves. We put all the stuff on computers. We don't have the filing cabinets anymore. That was due for space. We got all the computer upgrades. We got all the mail by mail, computer, pay your bills by computer. We got all this to save space, time. Now we're going to tear down the facilities for your pleasure, for your brand new buildings and your brand new offices. Again, it's happening over and over again, and so now this time you're going to try to do it again. 2.5 years till 2024, the general election, and you guys are going to pull this right now. All right, we're going to keep a check on that, and people are watching. We're watching, so carry on. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Board. Randy LaForest. It's been a while since I've been coming to the meetings. I thought I'd retired from this. However, I don't understand why you need or want to put a campus at Ballard and Jefferson with the traffic on Jefferson. How many more lights is it going to take people to turn left off of Shook onto Jefferson or Crocker? How are the people going to get out? Number one, this is so much better. You have so many more ways of people coming to this facility. This facility is normally closed down by 4:30, 5 o'clock, except for 4 meetings a month, unless you have a special meeting. So it's quiet. You don't have trouble, the neighbors don't have trouble with you. Do we not have inspectors? Do you not at your own homes have inspectors come out and inspect your furnaces, your air conditioners, your windows, your this, your that? Every year, every other year? You should have known all this. You would have had the money to do it step by step by step. This is a well-built building. Not only that, it's also a safe haven in case of a tornado, because some people who don't have basements could come and go right down into this basement. It was mentioned, and we have the inspectors. We have maintenance people. Does this township have $100 to buy a power washer? That they can't go out and power wash that front entrance and along the boards? Every time I come, it's terrible. And it's not a very good first impression for any company that's coming in here. Or I imagine any of the other buildings. We've had trouble at the senior center not being taken care of properly, not maintained. The ditches not maintained. Just so many things that if you would have done it as you would your own home, you would not all of a sudden need X amount of dollars to rip this down, sell it, and build a brand new thing that is only one way in. This you have so many ways in. People from North River can come over via South River, the Beach Road, Crocker, Town Hall, you know, Ashland, Coolidge. There's many, many ways to come. Not only that, you don't need a big meeting room. Years ago, this room used to be filled. Now, due to cable, Facebook, people not, you know, just looking on Facebook and being armchair quarterbacks, they don't come to the meetings. So, what do you need a big meeting room for? And you have your conference room, and if you need, you know, I know at our business, the roof is checked every 2-3 years. So any problem is caught right away. The sooner it's caught, the less it costs. Somebody has dropped the ball. And I'm not saying it's you, it's been previous boards also. But it's up to you to do something about it. This has been a staple in this township forever, forever. And there's plenty of room to add on anything that you want. You have plenty of land. Although I don't understand why you would need to add on, because since you did away with a lot of our inspectors and other assessors, things like that, we don't have half the employees that we used to. So, what do we need something bigger and better, and just because it overlooks a spillway or this or that, and it's fancy? You know, this has history. Don't you care about the history of this township? This is why people move here, is for the quaintness, the being like up north, but yet close enough to get to their jobs and be able to go uptown and things like that. It's just maintenance. It starts with maintenance and maybe a power washer. Look what happened at the senior center. That was an embarrassment. And all the other things. And I will be saying something else under public comments, but basically that's what I wanted to say tonight, is treat this like you would your home. Inspect it. If you feel the air or the furnace is going, you know the lifespan of it. Every time you turn around, you're fixing a roof, you're doing this, you're doing that. Well, whoever you're hiring is not doing a good job. So, we have the inspectors, because you send them out on any new jobs. Things have to be brought up to code. It should be done here too. And it should be done at least checked once, twice a year. And keep on top of it. It will cost less in the end. So, thank you for listening to me.
Thank you. Seeing no other public comment, we'll close the floor for public comment. Move back to board comment. A couple things that I feel I need to respond to. I heard it said, we want to build a new facility. I have not heard anybody in this board, and I have never said that I want to build a new facility. I want to know what the cost is, and I want to be able to give this board what the cost is so that this board can make the decision. I don't have the ability to build a new facility. I don't know if it's a good idea to build a new facility. But unless I can give the information to this board, I can't ask them to make that decision. We should have the money. We have the money to do this. Whatever this option is, we can afford to do this. We should have known or inspected. We do regularly service and inspect the facilities. No one said we need a big meeting room. However, the fact remains that we have more demand for public meeting space than we have meeting space available. On a regular basis, the senior center is not available in the evening for meeting space. The library utilizes this space, and we coordinate with the library, and I regularly open up this space in the evening for homeowners associations that have a need to hold annual meetings, but maybe a neighborhood doesn't have a particular facility. Some condo associations might have a clubhouse, but the majority of them do not, and they need a public place to meet, so we open up this space for them. But no one ever said, we need a bigger meeting space. What we've said is we'd like to employ professionals to evaluate what our needs are, assign a cost to that, and bring that cost back to this board so that the board can say, do we want to do A, do we want to do B, do we want to do C? Nobody ever said we need something. No one here has said we need something bigger or better. And do the same as you would with your home. That's exactly what we've done. We have delayed replacing things here in an interest of getting extended life out of them. But there comes a time when some of those improvements simply have to be scheduled. So we either need to spend money here or move somewhere else. What's the cost? I don't know. Without knowing the cost, I just can't justify saying I'm going to spend $500,000 on a parking lot and HVAC and roofs, and we could have done better by relocating. I simply don't know. It's not what I do. I never did facilities management for a living. I don't know what those costs are. If we had that background, sometimes we bring those things to this board table. But in the absence of any of us having that, it seems prudent to employ a professional to take a look at that plan, to know what those costs are. And until I could have that idea, I don't think I could come to you and say, since we formed this facilities subcommittee, I've probably said a half a dozen times to somebody coming to me saying, we really need to replace this. And I've said, well, can we get 3 to 6 months out of it? Yes. All right. Let's push it 3 to 6 months until we know what the results of this are, assuming the board goes in that direction. And then we know, yep, it's probably the best thing to stay here. Or, no, it's really not a good investment. I simply don't know that, and I'm merely asking this board to approve the labor necessary by a third party to give us the information we need to make that decision. But I've never said I want a new facility, never said it needs to be bigger, better, any of those things. We need to know what we need. And I agree with some of the comments that likely when we're done, if we add up our total square footage, we probably have an excess of office space. And there's nothing suggesting that we need more of that space. But employing a firm that deals with other municipal facilities and has probably a better pulse on what those trends are comes at an advantage. I'd rather spend an extra 10 grand now to make a decision on any of these options are 6 to 7 figures. So that's why we brought the recommendation. But again, I appreciate the fact that sometimes people hear this and say, well, behind all this is really a plan to do something else. And while I understand the skepticism, we've never said that. That is certainly not my goal. But even if it were, I'm not coming to you saying, here's what we need to do. I'm coming to this board saying, let's employ a third-party neutral professional as a result of a recommendation of a subcommittee to give us that information and provide us with the recommendations, and you make that decision. So.
Well, and you should remember that when we looked at the Land Crews Administration building, we ultimately decided that wasn't a good idea.
Correct.
And we had an option to purchase that building. It was a pretty decent situation, but, I mean, as far as purchase, but the building itself it just wasn't worth it.
Well, and
that's
in the
why
end,
we're still here.
Right, in the end,
So.
we employed a professional. We did a little bit more of that legwork on this site ourselves. But in the end, the board decided not to go in that direction, and that's fine. And they may come to that same conclusion now. But again, just as back in, I believe that was 2014, the proposal wasn't, hey, let's buy the building. The proposal was, let's evaluate it, and based on that evaluation, what's the motion? The board chose not to move. And that may be very well the same outcome here. But the difference is from 2014 until now, we do have deferred maintenance on this facility that may start to influence that decision. Until I know the numbers, I couldn't tell you myself which way I lean. So.
I just can't hold my tongue any further. I'm tired of hearing this hand-picked board. There was about 12 candidates running for trustee, and the voters chose us, so, and we try to represent them very well.
Sure. Understood. All right. Is there any other discussion? Hearing none, we have a motion by Mr. Badkins with support by Mr. Olgiati to engage Wakely Associates to provide facilities evaluation and planning services at a cost not to exceed $29,000. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Board. Next on our agenda is regarding OPEB. Board members, we recently completed our 2021 audit. During the review, we learned that the OPEB trust is a little more than 19% funded. OPEB is Other Post-Employment Benefits. That fund was established in order to fund future non-monetary retirement benefits, mainly retiree health care. Just a side detour, not unique to Harrison Township, but employers in both the private and public sectors historically funded healthcare benefits on a pay-as-you-go basis, not anticipating that the cost to provide healthcare benefits would exceed the rate of inflation exponentially. We inherited a large unfunded amount. Prior boards had begun the process of putting money aside. We have added to that, and in 2011 or 2012, we established a trust fund which allows us to invest this money on a more traditional, long-term structure in stocks and securities and bonds and those kinds of things. So instead of getting a fraction of a percent in a savings account, we generate, I think, a long-term average of between 6 and 7% from this fund. Back in 2019, we had to approve a corrective action plan per the requirements of the Michigan treasurer, and we employed the actuary and projected where the fund would be by a certain time, and that plan, corrective action plan, included a commitment to reach a funding level of 40% of this fund by 2041. It has been several years since we have contributed to the OPEB trust, and since each of the three major funding units showed a surplus in excess of a minimum of $200,000 for 2021, even when factoring in other savings, I am making a recommendation that we direct the finance director and treasurer to transfer $100,000 from the surplus, ultimately, from the general fund, the fire fund, the water and sewer fund to the OPEB trust. Certainly not necessarily market timing, but it seems like we're kind of on a downward swing, and while we can't say for sure, it seems like we're not at the top of the market right now. And I know it's a small bite, but 100,000 here and 100,000 there with compounding interest will help us to get closer to funding our obligations per prior contracts. Any discussion, or is there a motion?
I'll make a motion to direct the finance director and treasurer to transfer $100,000 from the general fund, the fire fund, and the water and sewer fund to the OPEB trust.
Is there support?
Support.
All right. Discussion on the motion, board members? No? Hearing none and seeing no public comment, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carries. Thank you, board. Next on our agenda, item E3 regarding some of the fees at our senior center. Our senior activity coordinator has been adding programming at our senior center, and we kind of was the charge that she was given. She's making adjustments based on how popular some of the new activities are. The aerobics and chair yoga programs have proven to be very popular. It's been a flat fee that each instructor is paid, a flat fee of $50 per class. And based on the number of classes, it's roughly $800 per month. The amount that each instructor is paid is under our spending limit, but because this is a recurring expense, I am asking the board to approve the total annual amount for these services. So I'm looking for an approval of a $50 payment per instructor per session with an annual budget for these services not to exceed $100,000 for aerobics and chair yoga at the senior center. With holidays and other interruptions that happen in the schedule, I anticipate the actual cost is likely closer to $9,000. But as a budgetary figure, I'm looking for the $50 per session and a total cost annually not to exceed $10,000.
Did you initially say 100,000?
He did.
Did I? Oh, wow. Yeah, 100,000 bad,
A
10,000
lot of
good.
cherry will go.
Well, if it's only
Yeah.
10,000, I'll make that recommendation.
All right, good. Yep, it is. I anticipate it'll be less than that. It's a conservative number. Is there support for the motion?
Support.
We've got a motion by Mr. Batkins with support by Mr. Tominello. We're seeing an increase in attendance, and it's growing, and that's a good thing. So
That's an amazing like the instructor cost there, that's cheap.
it's pretty
I mean,
reasonable,
like,
yeah.
You go pay for your own class, it's like $20 a lesson, you know what I mean, like,
Yeah, yeah, and I do, I think it's a good thing, for the folks that participate there. You know, different programs, some folks just like the bingo or just like the cards, but this is just another wrinkle, another option, and it's proven to be pretty popular.
Is there an age requirement to be considered in the senior center programming?
You know, that's a good question, not that I'm aware of. I think is actually, I think it would be age discrimination if you assigned it,
I
but,
believe it's 55 or better.
yeah, but I don't know that you have if someone were to come in, I don't know that you could say,
You're not
sorry,
carding
buddy, you
with
gotta
them.
leave, right?
Okay.
So it seems to be more of it's more social, you know, I haven't seen that, but that's a good question. I don't know I'm not, you know, I was told one time that if you were to apply for a membership with AARP, they cannot refuse you based on age because it would be age discrimination. So, but, yeah, it's not one that's come up that I'm aware of, so you're welcome to attend if that's what you're
Okay,
asking.
thank you, yes.
Okay, any other discussion on the motion?
Who did?
Hearing none and seeing no public comment, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carries. Thank you, Board. Next on our agenda is regarding Phragmites. Board members, Harrison Township is and has been a member of the Lake St. Clair Cooperative Invasive Species Management Area, or SISMA, for several years. We've worked with other communities to reduce the spread of invasive species. For us, it's primarily Phragmites. Macomb County Department of Roads is also a partner and a member, and for the past several years, they've agreed to pay for half of the cost to treat Phragmites in road rights-of-way, partnering with local municipalities. There is a map in the board packet which shows the areas to be treated in Harrison Township. They will occasionally vary by a small amount, maybe if they see something, again, if it's in the road right-of-way. The projected cost for our share of this treatment for 2022 would be $3,000. The actual cost will be determined through a competitive quote process that the SISMA coordinator takes care of. I'm recommending that we approve up to $4,000 in matching funds to treat Phragmites in right-of-way areas for 2022. For reference, this is the same amount that we approved in 2021, and the actual cost of treatment for 2021 came in at $2,384.78. So I'll be looking for a motion to approve up to $4,000 in matching funds to treat Phragmites in right-of-way areas for 2022.
So moved.
All right, is there support? Support. Motion by Mr. Tominello, support by Mr. Loggiati. And we're working with, licensed applicators. The SISMA was established initially through grant assistance from the state, so, it is something supported at that level. Sometimes people will say, well, is this safe, or is this, problematic? The reality is, ignoring Phragmites is more problematic to the environment than treatment of the Phragmites.
How's the layout done as far as, I see the map here.
Yep, so initially, when we established our treatment program, I worked with the prior SISMA coordinator. We basically took a day, not quite a day, I know we stopped for lunch somewhere, but better part of a day, just doing a windshield tour where she might be looking, she was using an app on her phone, GPS coordinates, things like that, but also kind of counting on someone locally to say, hey, where are these issues, where are these problems? And some of them, there's areas that are county drains, and they work with Public Works. There's areas that are road rights-of-way, we worked with that. Lake St. Clair Metro Park has done treatment. So we initially began with that, and then on an annual basis, they kind of repeat that windshield survey, focusing on areas that are just, popping up, just as they spread.
The reason I asked, for maybe it's not obvious reasons, is Bridgeview getting addressed like we did it a couple years ago? Remember we had that issue?
Yeah,
I didn't
that,
see it as being
yeah,
colored
that
in,
is not a treatment area.
but I did notice that there was Phragmites setting up shop there again.
Correct, yeah.
Okay.
So that turned out to be a mixture of private, or I should say, of public and private land, and the problem there was that the coordinator in working with the contractor perceived that a portion of that, which appeared to be public right of way, was actually private property.
And that's why the question was
Right,
asked.
so there are occasionally places where we see that problem on private property, and we might work with those applicators. The reality is it's proven to be very difficult to coordinate that work on private property. So, the good news is we don't have a lot of that problem on private property. So, they do tend to walk or spread through, public rights of way.
And they are a pain in the butt to pull out, let me tell you.
No, they're tough.
I get them on my property. Man, it's like a constant battle with those things. I mean,
Yeah.
no matter what you do, you just cannot get rid of them.
Well, the rhizomes spread, and the tips of the rhizomes, as they expand underground, they actually excrete acid, or something caustic to other living things. So they're actually growing, killing things, and expanding. There is a Phragmite that is native to our area. I can't tell you the specific name. The invasive species is Phragmites australis, and it just outcompetes everything else. So the native Phragmites, like you'll see some Phragmites every turn at Lake St. Clair Metro Park, but if they're the native species, they exist in concert with other native species. The non-native invasives will just wipe everything out and displace wildlife, so. All right, any other discussion on the motion? Hearing none and seeing no public comment, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carries. Thank you, board. Next on the agenda, item E5 regarding temporary inspectors. As I thought about this after I put this on the agenda, it's very possible we've talked about this with a prior board, but again, it doesn't hurt to kind of run things by the current board and make sure everybody's on the same page. For plumbing, mechanical, and electrical inspections, we use part-time inspectors. The reality is we just don't have that much development or growth. We're largely built out, so it's hard to have full-time inspectors for those trades. Our policies and procedures define how much they are paid. They receive no benefits other than, I believe, a certain amount of sick leave that was mandated at the state level. Occasionally, we utilize temporary inspectors from neighboring communities when our inspectors are sick, on vacation, or otherwise not available. Recently, we had to do this in order to accomplish some plumbing inspections. Sometimes this need, almost certainly, this need is unexpected and there isn't time to wait for board approval. So if we find out that Mr. Smith is simply unavailable on Thursday, but we have schedules, inspections scheduled, we have a choice of either delaying someone's project by not inspecting their plumbing or utilizing a temporary inspector. Communities have been pretty good about sharing their inspectors, and so I'm asking the board authorize the building official and supervisor to approve utilizing these temporary employees with the name of any temporary inspector that works more than 100 hours per year to come before the board for approval. This will allow us to complete inspections, avoid delays for our contractors and residents. The price for these inspectors, again, the hourly rate that we pay is established in the policy. This is just one of those situations where our building official might call a neighboring community and say, man, I'm really stuck, this Thursday. Yeah, I've got a guy, I can cut him loose. He takes time off from his job. We pay him as a temporary inspector. Again, it happens infrequently, so, short of something catastrophic, we're not looking at $100. If we do have someone that's more permanent, again, we bring that name back. But we're talking about someone that's already qualified, licensed, and working in another community, So I'd be looking for a motion to authorize the building official and supervisor to approve hiring and utilizing temporary inspectors with the name of any temporary inspector working more than 100 hours in a year to come before the board for approval.
I would make that motion if it amended our policy, so we know that it's in there, because you mentioned, hey, we might have done this before, let's put it in our policy, so that way,
Okay.
you know what I mean, that way there's a trail there, so
Yeah,
that
that's
way
okay.
somebody else doesn't have the same issue later.
Yeah. So I have no problem incorporating that into our policy.
Yeah, so I'd make a motion to add the proposed language to our, authorizing the building official and supervisor to hire, and utilizing temporary inspectors, with the name of any temporary inspector that works more than 100 hours to be back before the board added to our policy.
Yeah, okay, I can add that to the policy. Would we want to ultimately maybe even not make a motion and bring a policy back, or is this board comfortable approving this language and I can just email that policy once it's drafted? So, in other words, you can either authorize.
I'm good
or
either way, I just think
Yeah.
this way there's a paper
It's
trail.
codified.
Yeah.
Yeah, makes sense.
I'll support that.
Okay. And unless there's any objection, I'll just update the policy based on this.
Yeah,
email.
and Terry will send out an updated
Yeah.
version of everything.
And the hourly rates are captured in the contract?
In the policy.
Okay.
So this board approves those changes,
Okay.
on kind of, on a recurring basis when, kind of on demand. All right, any discussion on the motion? Hearing none and seeing no public comment, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carries. Thank you, board. Next, item E6 regarding a Macomb County Sheriff's Office deputy. Board members, our current contract for police services with the Macomb County Sheriff's Office includes 14 deputies and 1 dispatcher. This contract is in effect through the end of 2024. There is a trend in law enforcement and education to assign an officer to high schools, and Lance Cruz has recently made the decision that they would like to take that step. Lance Cruz High School North is located in Macomb Township, and Macomb Township also contracts with Macomb County Sheriff's Offices for their police services similar to us. Different quantity of deputies, but same contract, same rate. Dakota High School already has a Macomb County Sheriff's Office deputy assigned to the school, and Macomb Township shares in that cost 50-50. When Lance Cruz approached Macomb Township to share in the cost of a deputy at High School North, they agreed to treat that school district the same way with a 50-50 split. Now that they're putting a deputy in at High School North, for parity, they would like to do the same thing and employ a full-time sheriff's office deputy at our high school. There are several benefits to this arrangement, with the most obvious being increased safety and reduced response times for the staff, to benefit the staff and students at Lance Cruz High School. The deputy would be assigned to Harrison Township during any holidays or during the summer break, which is especially attractive because our summertime is generally our busiest time of the year, with the increased population associated with Lake St. Clair Metro Park and marinas and so forth. Another benefit would be the reduced demand on our existing deputies. Currently, when there is a call at Lance Cruz High School or Middle School Central or Middle School South, our regular road patrol staff are pulled off the road and into the school. With this arrangement, the schools would have an assigned deputy with all the powers necessary to search, detain, investigate, write reports, which will eliminate that demand on our road deputies. There's really 3 kinds of calls. There might be an issue at a school, and they make a call and a deputy responds. Maybe the result of that is to have a conversation with someone and no report is generated. So that's kind of the lowest level call. The second level of a call would be where they're going to write a report. They show up and maybe they take a report on a potential larceny. And the third level might be something that's, I guess I'll say, at a higher criminal level, where they might have to be involved in maybe someone who might be prosecuted for a crime or turned over to the prosecutor's office. Included in your board packet are some of the statistics associated with some of those higher level crimes. However, based on reports I received from the sheriff's office, they make an average of 2 to 4 calls to the school that generate a report per week. Obviously not during times when the school's closed. And so they're making more than 2 to 4 trips to our schools for various reasons. So certainly from the perspective of our 14 deputies that are doing road patrol services, this is attractive to them because it frees up their time to focus on the rest of the township. The process that the sheriff's office uses, it involves first soliciting volunteers from their existing staff. Then they go through an interview process with the high school, or I should say with administration, Lance Cruz administration, involving us. This would help ensure that the deputy is someone who wants to be in the schools and is a good fit for an assignment working with young people and so forth. So the contract that we have defines what the cost is per deputy. They're saying based on when they believe the start time would come, the balance of this year would be $22,785 would be our share. As the contract progresses, which you can imagine, they have employment contracts that have built-in raises and things. Our highest cost in this contract would be $72,002, and that would be for the 2024 year. During our audit review, we learned that our police fund finished 2021 with a $70,623 surplus. So generally equating to that cost, right? So we're pretty close in being able to swing a half a deputy. There are attached statistics showing runs to the schools over the past 3 years. There's figures showing from our current contract an amendment number 1 to the contract, which would add this deputy and obligate the township to 50% of the cost for the deputy through 2024. I am recommending we authorize the supervisor to execute amendment number 1 to the Macomb County Sheriff's Office contract. I'll just add for reference, when we think of our neighbors, Clinton Township provides 2 officers at 50% to the Chippewa Valley facilities that are in Clinton Township, and I think 1 officer is assigned to Clintondale. It's a smaller district, smaller school, and again, but their arrangement that Clinton Township provides is 50% falls on their township, 50% falls on the school district. So it makes it, this is kind of one of those things where if we were to debate this, we'd say, well, is 50% the right number? You know, it would be hard for me to say, well, if our neighbors are doing this and that seems to be the agreeable rate, that's the case. Could I argue that I get less than 50% benefit? Yeah, but I believe we're also providing a benefit to our schools, and safe schools benefit our community in a holistic way. I think the residents we serve sometimes don't really care if 50 or 70,000 comes from our pocket or the school district's pocket. It's all coming from their pocket. So for that reason, I recommend that we execute amendment number 1 to the Macomb County Sheriff's Office contract. Any discussion, or is there a motion?
I got a discussion.
Okay.
So I used to work for Longview Schools, and I know they used to have deputies in the schools 9-10 years ago.
Correct.
Full-time. And they were usually retired police officers. Wasn't the school district paying for them completely then?
Yeah, so a couple of things there. I'm not intimate with 9 or 10 years ago. Anecdotally, through conversation, someone said I thought it was explained to me that they used to put an actual police, so there's a difference between a retired police officer and a police officer, right? You can understand that. So it may have been that they had full-time actual deputies in the schools. I don't have knowledge of that. I can't speak to that. Someone said that used to be the case. In either case, over the past several years, based on probably during the time that I've been supervisor that I'm aware of, they have been retired or former police officers from different departments. And I guess I'll say 2 things to that. One is there was a trend to see that kind of a thing, and that trend seems to be changing more to having full-time officers, actual police officers as opposed to retired officers in that role. I understand that my conversation with a representative from the school district was that the school board had been considering going to this model, similar to what some of their peers have done in, surrounding us. But the timing of this was associated with the fact that one of those retired deputies made the decision to retire from High School North. So they said, okay, well, now it's kind of a time we either have to continue this model and try to hire another retired deputy, or accept that retirement, replace that individual with a sheriff's deputy, and I believe the individual that's at our high school, they found another location for employment internally. So this was kind of a school board decision that they approached me on. I had casual conversation, just to see where we're at, and I felt comfortable bringing this, knowing that this is reflective of what a lot of our peers are doing.
But we've never paid before.
We
This is
have-
a new precedent we're setting.
That's absolutely right.
Okay, that's what I wanted to find out.
That I know of, I don't know, maybe you have history.
I don't believe that's 100% correct, that we've never been involved in a relationship with them. But it's, you know, probably, you know, at least 18 years ago that we would have had something like that. So, I mean,
Yeah.
I just don't want to say never, because I
Yeah.
believe there
I
was a
know,
time
never
where
is
we
a
were
long
involved.
time.
Well, yeah, never, if we're talking 11 and a half years, then it's never.
Right.
Because that's how long I've been doing this, but if it was before that, I don't
Okay,
know that.
yeah.
But to your point, and again, you know, there's things you come to and you say, this is a no-brainer. You know, I think overall, this is a good idea,
Yeah, I'm
but
just
we are
trying to
kind of
get
setting a
this.
precedent, but we're really kind of, I'd almost say we're following a precedent that we've seen Macomb Township. I can't speak to Chesterfield, so I don't know that answer, I didn't ask that question, but I know that Macomb Township, Clinton Township
Yeah,
do the
good.
same thing.
Especially being that we have the surplus in that budget already, that will cover, this deputy. I don't think this is something that we have to do this. I mean, we live in a different world right now.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, you know, we owe it to our families that live in the community, our kids that go to school there, to give them the safest environment to learn that we possibly can.
Sure. I think there are residents that we represent that might say, gosh, this is a sad thing that we have to do this, but I don't think there are too many residents that say this is a bad idea. I think people think that this is probably the best way. And you know, we discussed some of the ancillary benefits I did with the command staff of the sheriff's office. I mean, if you've got a police officer in there and there's an awareness, that awareness can lead to, you know, some of the things that we talked about was like, well, you know, at what point does adding more deputies change safety? I mean, I can't have a deputy in every place at every time, but the more presence that you have and the more awareness, you know, oftentimes you read about issues that come up and someone says, you know, I kind of had a hunch based on something I observed or, you know, something. So having a deputy in the school, having that relationship with the staff and students, it just seems like it can only benefit the residents as a whole.
Yeah, I'm not super, I feel like, and I don't think it's necessarily the Land Crew School Board, but I feel like there's a transfer in cost to us.
I agree.
And I'm not super excited about that, but when every other community around you, that's the model, it's tough to say we're doing anything different.
Right, and again, like I said, you know, if this number were different, if I were to say, well, I'm not sure that I get a 50% benefit, is it 35? You know, another 15% off of this is, you know, 20, 30,000, you know what I mean? Like, it isn't gonna, to debate that number really isn't gonna change our budget or our ability to fund it, and again, I think sometimes folks say, well, look, it all came out of my pocket, I don't care how it gets there, I think it's wise to have a deputy in the school. So debating what our share is a toughie. But I agree, if you were to say, do I think we're getting exactly 50% of the benefit from this? Not directly, in terms of our responsibility to provide police services. But I do believe that overall the people we serve are benefiting.
So, when, I know Mr. Verkes brought this up to me a few months back, and I was initially, you know, for this, and I guess when I started thinking about it, the more I started thinking about it, you know, the whole thing is, you know, everyone just received their taxes. And I've heard more and more people saying, those are your school taxes. So people are already paying school tax. They're paying a tax to the school. The school, I feel, should be covering this expense. Secondly, the assumption that you're making based on these statistics is that none of our existing sheriffs, other than this one that we were proposing to be in the school, will never go to the schools, because they will. Because when there's an issue of any kind, the one deputy that's at the school is not going to handle it. They're going to call in backup. So we're still going to have those people and those deputies going to the school. So you're still going to take them out of service.
I disagree with that.
Well, great. So my thing is, you know, I feel if I'm going to spend $72,000 to bring half a deputy in, I want them to service issues with our neighborhoods, with theft. You know, we had actually an ex-board member, you know, wanted to talk to us because there's theft in the neighborhood. I don't think that we're going to get our money's worth, and that's just my thought. I think people are paying enough with school taxes. I've paid school taxes, my kids don't go to school, many are like that. And you know what? They should be able to afford that.
Their operating budgets are much higher than ours.
Well, there's no question about that.
I just
Yep.
don't, again, I was for this at the beginning, and now I guess I just really, I think it'd be a burden on, if I'm going to burden our residents, I want them to have the full benefit.
So, a couple of things about that issue of calls. I don't want to say an argument, but if I take that perspective, it would cut both ways, and what I mean by that is this. This is a 15th licensed deputy in Harrison Township. It was made clear to me that based on their experience in other buildings, you know, this goes both ways. So when you say, if there were a significant incident at the high school, yes, there's gonna be a response that's greater. The vast majority of the incidents that occur at the high school don't require more than one deputy to respond. So currently, one deputy responds to certain calls. That deputy would be at the school. Another advantage of this individual is if we did have something catastrophic that was not at the school but was in the township, this is one more car and one more officer that can respond. Similar to the way that sometimes we share resources with Mount Clemens and vice versa. So there are some benefits. I will definitely agree with anybody who says, you know, I think it's less than a 50% benefit. But having said that, it is more than a 0% benefit.
Let's talk about statistics. I've counted 34 instances in 2021 where the police had to go to the school. At $72,000, are we getting our money's worth with 34 runs during the course of a year?
Yeah.
I'm not thinking so.
Yeah, and so, and I almost didn't include this because this is misleading. This was provided by the command staff, and so I provided it to this board. This is not the total number of runs. These are, so there's a difference between saying, hey, there was an incident and I have to respond and I have to write a report. This kid claims this happened. Some things generate a report. Those runs are 2 to 4 per week, and I can show you that data. But they're not this level. So the data that we receive from the command staff talks about vape possession, controlled substances, marijuana, alcohol, criminal sexual conduct, fighting and trespassing, and school threats and concealed weapons. Those are those kinds of high-level calls that result not only in a call and a report, but they were putting those in because these things now result in Officer Smith having to attend court hearings. And so if you say, let's say if a student says, you know, somebody stole my iPod. All right, I go there, I take a report, I fill it out. We don't know who did it, but I have to file a report. You can give it to your insurance company. That's a one and done. That's taking a guy out or a lady out for an hour, let's say. These are the sorts of things, and I think why they put these in is because these are the things that not only result in a run on that particular day, but then beyond that, working with a prosecutor, maybe attending court, having to file or pursue different higher level things. And those are some of the things that you say like, okay, well, Officer Smith is assigned to Harrison Township and he should be on patrol this Tuesday, but he had to be in circuit court for a good portion of Tuesday or meet with them. That's why these were included, because these are extra.
And again, one other thing is, keep in mind, this sets a precedent. So, you know, the high school, then the middle school, and then, so where does it stop? You know, how many half a cops are we going to be paying for? So, again, this is just argumentative. I'm, you know, bringing some points up.
Yeah.
I was for this initially. After I did more thoughts and did more research, I just can't support this.
Understood.
And I guess you have to consider what is the value of presence too, you know, having somebody underneath that roof. I mean, I just, you know, I don't think any of us on this board can really understand what goes on in schools nowadays, because we can go to school and other things.
And I'm not arguing that. I'm just saying the school should be paying for it, not us. You know, why are we having our residents pay for the school's issues? That's all I'm saying. The school should be paying to manage their students' facility and whatever.
Right. And so if I were to say, okay, this person is going to be in the schools, let's just say 40 weeks of the year, and might be deployed in the township for 12 weeks of the year, right? That that might suggest a cost split of something other than 50-50, right? But that wouldn't, if they said, well, look, we can't hire a guy and have, or lady and only employ him for 40 weeks out of the year, they're saying, we're looking for someone to make up that balance. So let me just say this without putting words into your mouth. You would say, hey, I'm willing to pay 50 seconds of the share, because if I get the deputy for 12 weeks and they get him for 40 weeks, in essence, hey, that way you can employ the person, so some share in that when they're assigned to road patrols in Harrison Township would seem fair, right?
So if I want a policeman in Harrison Township, I want a full policeman, and if the residents want it, we'll pay for it. I don't want a fraction of a policeman. You know, he's busy because other things are going on, he can't be deployed. I mean, there's so many conditions where that person may not be able to be deployed. You know, and the whole thing is, if they don't have a full-time person, maybe they get a part-time person. Somebody that doesn't work year-round, but maybe just during the school season, then it won't cost $145,000. So again, arguments both ways. I just don't think the residents should be burdened with that, with the amount of school taxes they're paying today here in Harrison Township.
Well,
I'm not, and trust me, I think we need additional officers, but I think when we talk about officers, that's what we've been talking about. Officers for the residents to take care of larceny, burglaries, you know, break-ins, things that are happening right now in our township.
Understood. Yep. And again, as I said, I felt this was a good fit because for the busiest time that we have, from a responding to calls perspective, the summer months, from the time kids are out of school to the time when kids are back to school, is historically our busiest time for police and fire services, because we have more residents and more of that demand. But I'm not trying to persuade you, I'm merely saying, if I were to say, hey, look, I'm gonna get a part-time officer, the time I would want them would be June, July, and August, because that's the time when we have the greatest need. So,
Because of the marinas.
because of that increased summertime population. I don't think this is a perfect arrangement, but I do believe it is a reasonable proposal, so.
Well, Mr. Verkest, where does that say it in the proposal that we're gonna have access to this police officer in the summer? Just because they're on the Macomb County and they're in our station, you're making that assumption, or does it?
No, that was a conversation, so, let me see.
And what's to say they won't use that extra person just within their ranks?
Yeah, if that would make this board more comfortable, I'm happy to have that included in the amendment. That was the conversation that I had with the command staff. So if you're concerned that they're saying, well, we're gonna take that person and deploy them elsewhere, and it's not included in this amendment, I have absolutely no problem having that amendment revised to reflect the fact that the deputy would be deployed in Harrison Township. I think because they've done this in other arrangements and other situations, this amendment was focused on saying, we're sharing that cost. This is how it's spelled out.
Yeah, I think you could clarify that third whereas to add, you know, because right now it says they're a school resource officer. It says that's what they're gonna do. So if you added something that during times when school is not in session, the officer will be assigned to road patrol, it's at least clear.
Right. It says the county shall provide additional law enforcement services within the corporate limits of the township as indicated above.
Right,
and
indicated
invoicing.
above, it says a school resource officer.
No, I understand.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I didn't,
No, yeah.
you know, that's the relationship that I have with the school district and with the sheriff's office wasn't one where I said, you know, I think this is a bait and switch. But if codifying it in the contract would make someone comfortable, I'd entertain a motion to approve the amendment as long as an additional third line is included in the agreement to establish that. I don't anticipate a problem with including that, but it was a part of our discussions when I was approached initially and in follow-ups. I had the conversation with the school superintendent as well as the sheriff and his command staff. So I'm not sure if that would be meaningful, if that would be worthy of a motion, or if there's further discussion.
I guess, just, I heard some valid points on sort of both sides of the discussion. And if we're getting this officer 3 months a year on the road to support L'Anse Creuse Public Schools to have their officer in the school, right? We're not paying for it, we're supporting it by covering that officer for the balance of the year. I think a 50-50, I think you brought it up where you're not even comfortable with the 50-50, but there's a number somewhere. I, for one, don't want to be somebody that says, hey, I don't want officers in schools. Today's world we live in, I believe if we voted no on this, they would still be in the schools. I believe that. I don't think L'Anse Creuse Public Schools would probably put, I think that people would be in the school. However, as a good neighbor, if we get 3 months during the summer of coverage for an excellent police officer, then let's do the math, because I don't believe these numbers have a squad car in it.
Right, so I was a part of the discussion, so what they said was, this, and that's a good question, it was part of our conversation. What they said was, when we talk about squad cars, if I'm a road patrol officer, I mean, that is a pretty, for lack of a better word, pretty high-tech machine, right? So I might not necessarily feel that having a radar-equipped patrol vehicle is necessary for someone who's gonna spend a majority of their working time at the school for a part of that time.
Yep.
Right? So a vehicle that's gonna be assigned, or I should say historically what they've done and what the sheriff said they'll do with these two individuals, one at North and one at our high school, is they take one of their fleet vehicles that's a sheriff's vehicle, but it might not necessarily be that first primary vehicle. So when they're assigned to L'Anse Creuse, they have a police car, it's got the lights and sirens, got the basics, but it might not necessarily be their primary. During the times that they're assigned, they work with the fleet of vehicles that we have. So if this individual is working in July, they've got a car already assigned to our station. But during a majority of the season, when they might be at the school, they're using a fleet vehicle that's, good enough to keep in service, but it might not necessarily be the cutting edge vehicle. So in essence, what they said was, in order to make this work, we're not throwing in the cost of a vehicle, but we will, Macomb County will be providing the individual with a police vehicle. So again, part of the discussion. And again, I want to state, I recognize that this isn't necessarily one of those things that comes right down to the penny and I can split it and say this is what our benefit is. If I have this individual for some 12 weeks during the summertime, roughly, maybe another 2 weeks, a week during spring break, 2 weeks during Christmas break, now I'm at maybe 15 weeks out of the year. Ignoring any other breaks or other times when this person's scheduled to work on a Monday and the school is closed for some reason. I'm getting some of that benefit for policing, but I'm also getting some of this benefit by physically reducing the burden on our officers. How I quantify that, I can't. I'm not going to be able to quantify that for you. Does it add up so that this comes out to be an exact 50%? No, I don't believe it does, but I think it's pretty close. And there's a point you get to where how do I divide this cost, and how do I look at it and say, well, I don't really care what all my peers are doing. This seems like an unfair deal. At some point, you have to say, look, we have a collective. I have a collective responsibility to provide police services. Some might argue, why is the school paying for a police officer to put in the school? They're not responsible for providing police services. I could twist this argument and say, Harrison Township should pay for the full cost. It is our responsibility. We provide police and we provide fire services. So I could look at this whole arrangement and say, why is the school paying anything toward it? Come in my school and give me a police officer because I need one. And I'm willing to bet there are communities in the Metro Detroit area that probably get that officer provided by the municipality for zero cost. Chief?
Right, yeah, thank you. Usually I don't participate in policy discussions. I just wanted to add one thing. I had served on a committee that looked at this for another school, and Mr. Prakash just said something that made me think I better speak up. What this committee found, and after getting expert consultation about these types of shootings around the country, is a major deterrent is a fully marked police car that's visible from the street. These folks that take on this crazy behavior don't like to see it. So what I'm saying is, if you decide to go forward and you're talking about amending the contract, I think we should add a term in there that there will be a police car that's
Marked.
marked, not just an undercover car.
Right.
It's not gonna serve the kind of deterrent that it should serve, so just give it some thought.
You know, again, I just want to continue to say, you know, and I agree, I'm not saying that I don't want police in our schools. I'm just saying I don't think this is the right way to pay for it. Because I think we need police in our schools, but I just don't think our residents should be paying for that.
Well, make no mistake, whether the school pays for it or whether we pay for it, our residents are paying for it. The question I would pose to you is why, I could make the argument, why should the school have to provide police protection? That's not a core function of their
Why does
task.
any corporation pay for security officers and on-site officers? Because that's part of business.
Sure.
That's part of the business, so that would be my answer,
Yeah, I got you.
right?
Right, I'm just-
You go down to GM doesn't have Detroit police at their headquarters.
Yeah,
They have internal security.
If we had a
internal
GM plant in
officers.
Harrison Township, we would have police officers that would respond to that plant, and we would pay the full cost. GM would not pay
They would.
a dime directly for that officer. They'll pay their property taxes,
That's
but
fine.
they don't
But
pay
I
the
think,
service.
but I think what Mr. Tominello was saying is they would have a security guard at their cost at the gate.
That's right.
Oh, for sure.
They wouldn't have a
Right.
sheriff officer that somebody else
Because
paid
they
for.
manage their own security, that's what I'm saying. Just like the schools should be managing their own security. That's my argument. Not that I don't want them, because I think we need them. I just don't think it's the right way to pay for it.
I guess one more thing for myself is, if you look at the cost of 70, excuse me, what was it, 72,002?
Yep, that's in the final year.
Yep, divided by 52 weeks. Excuse me, 72,002 times 2.
There you go.
Then divided by 52, it's approximately, I'm gonna use round numbers, 2,700 bucks a week. And I think it's easier for me with the precedent conversation is, we've funded or agreed to fund the police deputy while they are servicing the township, not the school. Because now you haven't set a precedent. Because they're already saying we're gonna have them in the schools. We're saying, okay, when they're not there, we'll take that burden on so the sheriff doesn't have to lay them off, look for part-time people and all that other stuff. I would feel more comfortable knowing somebody's in the school and when they're not, they're in one of our patrol cars and they're patrolling our neighborhoods. That, to me, then you're not setting a precedent to flip 50% every time. And if they go to a year-round school, that's real simple. Now we don't have to fund any of it.
Sure.
So, that's just my 2 cents. But I want police officers in the schools.
So, are you saying you'd be willing to fund a smaller portion than 50%?
I used the 15 weeks, 12 weeks while they're out of school and a week for a couple Christmas vacations and all that other stuff. You know, the officer will probably have to take vacation, but we're splitting hairs now.
Yeah, but that's
So,
a
yeah.
year, I mean, that's true for every firefighter and police officer.
Yeah,
we
so
employ.
15 to 16 weeks of it, Brian Batkin's personal opinion is, I could justify that because we're supporting the school with carrying the deputy while they're not inside the school protecting our kids.
So if I were to take 16 divided by 52 and multiply that times 144, no, that's not right. 16 divided by 52 equals times 144.
You're short of zero.
Yeah, there you go. That would be about, that'd be between $44,000 and $45,000. So if I were to say, hey, I get 15 weeks of benefit, 16 weeks of benefit, when you factor in, various days off, things like that, I'm at $44,000, $45,000.
That's where my head's at.
Sure.
That-
Now, if I were to say that over the course of a year, the other 9 months of the year, I'm not putting a demand on the 14 officers, meaning the 14 officers that we have assigned, because make no mistake, we can talk about the fact that it's the school's responsibility, but currently, because there is no police officer, if something occurs, they must call our police officers, and our police officers must respond. So it's fair to say that during the course of the 9 months that we are providing police services to the school, currently, we do spend the cost, or we bear the cost of taking one of those 14 deputies out of service for some period of the day, multiple times in a week. And I see that as also a benefit. So if I'm at 45, and I'm saying, okay, but then there's also a few hours a week, on average, for 9 months out of the year, you know, say it's a half of a day for 9 months, for 40 weeks, that's another 20 days. So now I've thrown another 3 weeks in there of collective time. And there's a point I get to where I can't really say, okay, well, it's gonna be 42% and 58%. And when if I get that close, and I recognize the ultimate goal is to make our community safe, it's hard for me to, just for me personally, to haggle over what's probably less than $10,000 of a justifiable difference. So I've said all along, and I maintain, I don't know that we get exactly directly 50% benefit for road patrol. But I do believe that by participating in 50%, we're getting ancillary benefits to our residents by making our school safer, having a stronger school presence, creating that prevention, and hopefully not being the folks that are on the 6:30 news on a national level. So I don't dispute. I guess I shouldn't say that. I don't look at your arguments and say you're crazy. I understand where you're coming from. I feel like we have a greater responsibility than zero to contribute to this, and I'm comfortable with a 50% split. And again, when I look at what some of our peers do, and I see that they've come to that conclusion, it's hard for me to see that we're somehow different in that respect than right now 200,000 other residents in Macomb County that do the same thing.
I was only looking at a way to not set a precedence, because this contract's up in December of 2024, when there'll be a new board seated, and then that board can decide, based on the data that they're given, was this the right thing to do? Should we have gone 50%? Should we have gone 75%? Should we not have done anything?
Right.
But another,
But we possess that right. We're only, if we agree to this amendment, we're only obligating ourselves for 2.5 years.
But then we set the precedence by splitting it with them. That's why I'm saying the 12 to 15 weeks in my head is when that officer's not in the school. That's the only reason. Because now the precedent is we're only covering that officer when they're not in a school. As a good neighbor, we're trying to support the sheriff's department and the school district. But if we say 50%, I guarantee in 2024, when whatever board's sitting up here, that's gonna be in front of them, and it's a 50-50 split, because that's what you've done the last 2 years.
And I appreciate that. What I would say though is I don't know that I agree that this is precedent setting any more than any other percentage split is precedent setting. This is precedent setting through 2024. At the end of 2024, or sometime during 2024, when there's time to renegotiate this contract, we can come to any agreement we'd like. And the reality is it will be this board that'll negotiate this, because they won't wait till November of 2024 to negotiate this contract. We're serving till November 20th, so short of any of us not making it 2.5 years, we'll be the ones voting on it. So I'm not, again, I don't want to split hairs, but it's because we agree to this, whether we do or whether we don't, doesn't mean we have to agree to renew it in 2024. The reality is the school district themselves might say, you know what? It didn't work out. We don't want to continue this. We want to go to a different security model. So I don't feel like this is, I don't believe it's precedent setting. This board, should they choose to agree to this, has the opportunity to continue the arrangement or to change the arrangement in a little over 2 years. So I'm not sure where we're at, if there's an interest in making amendments to the what you call item 1 and 2 there, Adam?
It was whatever the third whereas was.
Yeah. Well, I was thinking the now therefore, they would say these are the things that we're gonna continue.
Well, but it says now therefore as described above. So
Sure.
I would want to modify the above.
Yeah, but you could say number 3, you could say the county agrees to provide
6-1
X, Y, and Z, the county agrees to provide a marked car, I guess what I'm saying is I'm looking for either there is or is not a motion on this tonight. If there is, would including those items 3 and 4 in this agreement get you to a point where someone would be willing to make a motion on this.
Yeah, can we table this for 2 weeks while we update the policy according to all our comments we made tonight? Do they need this responded, like, let's digest
Yeah,
this.
but if the answer is no,
Right.
it's silly to go back and.
Tabling it is silly. So the short answer to your question is yes. The reality is, this is something somewhat time sensitive.
Okay.
So this was provided to me, it was provided to the Board of Commissioners, Macomb County Board of Commissioners. They agreed to this. Macomb Township, as far as I understand, have agreed to it, which was simpler for them because they're already doing that for Dakota. So it'd really be hard to look at High School North and treat High School North different than Dakota. So I can't speak to what happened when they agreed to this arrangement with Dakota, but having set that as their agreed relationship, it's not hard to imagine that they continued that relationship with High School North.
So how do you know that they are using that officer in the off times when school's not in session? You're sure of that, or you said you had a conversation, like,
Yeah,
we
so,
will be able to use this person?
yeah, so, that is to say, like, I don't go on a day, and I don't mistake this for being a wise guy. I don't go to the police department and count heads on a daily basis. They tell us they're gonna give us 14 deputies and provide police protection. We don't audit that regularly. I don't go there and say, well, what shift are you working, right? So we already have a relationship over the course of decades where there's a certain level of trust that they're gonna respond and provide that protection. If in the conversation about this, if they say, here's what we do at Dakota, here's what we're doing at North, and here's what we're gonna do at your high school, I take that as much about the fact that I believe them when they say they're gonna give us 14 deputies and the vehicles that are associated with it, as any other relationship. So not having that in this agreement doesn't change my interest in participating in this agreement. But my point is if having that in this agreement or in this amendment would change the support of some board members, it's worth us pursuing. If you say collectively, I'm just not interested and I don't care what you put in your whereas, well then you might as well tell me now because I gotta go back to the sheriff's office and the school district and say, sorry, my board doesn't support this amendment. So that was the reason why I was asking, is there a willingness, is there an interest? We can table it with those things, but it's silly to do so if I still don't like it, even if you put those in. At some point, we have to make a decision.
Is this an amendment to our current contract with the sheriff's department, or is this an entirely separate contract?
It's an amendment.
Specific? I think there should be a specific contract with the school system and the sheriff's department, not an amendment to what we have existing, because we're already providing the community with police protection. If the school system and the sheriff's department is coming to us and suggesting that we do something entirely different than what we're already doing, I think it should be an entirely different contract. So that way it expires in 2 years, and once it expires, we haven't set a precedent because now this is a separate contract from what we've already got with the sheriff's department. So that has to have its own reset button, just like.
But it does, it has the same timeline. Whether this is a separate contract or an amendment,
I
it'll have
agree,
the same deadline.
same timeline, but I think it should be a separate contract because it's a very specific situation aside from what we're already providing to the community. That's just my feeling on it. I think this should be its own entity. Rob, do you agree?
I heard a legal analysis earlier, 6 of one or half dozen other. It could go either way. You could do a separate contract. It seems like it could be done pretty quickly, because we just take the terms and add this to it, so either way works.
Again, though, I guess I'll ask the same
I
question.
just don't want it to become, I don't want that contract to become bigger and now we're obligated to do more. I think there should be a separate situation. If it doesn't work out for us, we can walk away and say,
But,
yeah, it
yeah,
didn't work out.
but whether it's an amendment or a separate contract, we're obligating, we would be, no matter what, we would obligate ourselves through December 31st of 2024. And when that time comes, it ends, and there is no obligation for us to really renew or continue it. So, again, if making this a separate contract makes a difference, that's good, but really that's.
For me, it does.
Sure,
I
sure.
think it should be a separate issue.
Right, but I guess what I'm getting at is, at some point, someone has to say, I'm not interested, 0. Okay, well, if there's 4 of you that feel that way, we don't need to talk about this anymore. So, if it's a separate contract, I have no problem with that. If it's adding some codicils in here, that's fine. But when all is said and done, the proposal before us is a 50-50 split. If small details will make a difference, I'm absolutely comfortable getting those details added. You know, Rob, I don't know, can I say, if the county were agreeable to a separate contract, and we included language addressing a marked car, and an assurance that anytime this officer is not deployed at the school, because they're closed, they would be deployed in road patrol. Can I say, if that were the case, can I take an advisory vote of this board, and then bring it back in 2 weeks? I mean, is that?
Well, you can take an advisory vote, or even something more firmer, and just follow up the way you just said, described in that potential motion.
Right, so I guess then what I'll ask is, before we might entertain a motion, would modifying how this contract is written and including 2 things about an assurance that they're deployed in the township when they're not at the school, and an assurance that they'll have a marked vehicle that would be at the school. Are there any other modifications that this board might want to consider before we might entertain a motion and take a vote?
So just a few questions. Maybe, can you talk about service, and when I say service, so if we have an officer, when we get the service from the Macomb County Sheriff, and it's for one officer for a year, do we actually get that officer for a year, or is that minus holidays, vacations, things like that, or do they provide substitutes? So how is that service gauged?
Yep, good question. So the answer to that is really parallel to our own fire department, and the answer is yes to both of those. So do they provide substitutes? Yes. Does vacations and sick time impact the availability of an officer? Absolutely. We pay 9 firefighters every 24-hour shift. We don't always have 9 firefighters on duty. But if we're below 6 firefighters, we call for overtime. So our minimum, when I say minimum staffing, I don't really want to get too far into that, but we ourselves in our own staffing for public safety say 9 is what we're paying for. There's times we have 9, there's times we have 8. There's times we have 8 for half of the day and someone goes home sick. But when we get to 6, that's our minimum. So if someone says, wow, I was injured, we call for overtime, someone comes in and we pay them so that we have 6 as a minimum.
So I guess what I'm trying to get answered is, if in fact we move towards this model, and that police officer needs to take vacations, he's probably gonna take them not during the school time, which means we're gonna have less coverage that we're expecting to the Harrison Township residents. So I guess I need to understand that. Then I need to understand, if this guy is a day shift guy and the demand is on night shift, does he move to night shifts when he's securing Harrison Township services? So I guess I need to understand that as well. Because if days is, typically, I don't know, is nights, I would assume nights are more active than days. And if this extra person is going to come to us during the day in the summer, does that make sense? Right? When we might need them on the night shift. I guess I need to understand that as well.
Yeah, none of that, those are great questions. Those are not captured in our contract. I cannot assure you that I can, if that's what you want in here, the deal's at dead. I cannot bind them to saying those things.
Right, but Mr. McCusker, that's what I'm trying to get at. So if we're gonna be paying this 50%, having an officer, it sounds great, but where does that service lie? Does it lie at our peaks, or is it provided in our low areas? And to me, there's just too many variables, too many questions.
But those variables exist in our own fire contract, in our current police contract. We don't bind them to say.
I understand that.
Right?
But just to say we have an officer sounds great, but is that officer, where is he gonna be, he or she gonna be in a place where they need to be most effective, based on the needs here in the township?
That is not one that, and I'll look to Mr. Huth, I don't believe I'm able to capture that in this. I don't believe I would be able to get the sheriff's office to say this person is gonna be, if they're day, if this person is a, 7 to 3 person, which is likely what they'd be if they're a school liaison officer, they're gonna be 7 to 3, 12 months out of the year. So I think they could commit to that. I don't think they're gonna say this person's gonna go on afternoons for 3 months and days for 9 months. Having said that, having friends who are sheriff's deputies, it is not unique for them to take shifts when there are other shifts, especially if they're getting
No, I
close to
understand.
final average compensation or near retirement. They'll work overtime, they do move around.
I get that, but again, if it's a day shift and our larcenies are escalated between, you know, six PM and midnight, that extra deputy really is not doing us any good.
Yeah, again, I understand what you're saying, I wouldn't say they don't do us any good, but I understand what your reason
And
is.
I apologize for that
Less
language,
good.
but less good.
Well-
Less effective.
Right, but understand that in the 14 deputies, it isn't a constant quantity of deputies 24/7.
No, I
They already
understand.
take that into
Yeah,
account.
I understand.
By
And
certain
they,
times.
and they
that there is.
staff by, probably events and instances, right?
They staff based on need, so if they have a need to provide additional
Right.
officers because of an issue in Harrison Township from 3 to 11, they do that.
Right.
We don't call them up and say, hey, you need to do that.
But we most likely will not have, with this person, when he comes on duty for Harrison Township, will most likely be on the shift that he was on before. Most likely. I don't know, I'm just assuming, I guess.
Yeah, I can say, I've got a lot of questions, nobody called me about this except Dean. So I wish somebody could have said this, because frankly, based on the fact that I heard from no one, they didn't even ask the sheriff's representation to be here, because everyone I talked to thought it was a great idea. I wish I would have known that there were this many questions prior to 8 o'clock tonight, but it's okay.
And I
Right.
apologize.
No, I prepared accordingly, because
Yeah.
everybody I talked to said the only person who said they were concerned was Mr. Witt, and he said, I'm kind of a 48, 52 guy, I'm kind of struggling with it, but
And again.
that's the only feedback I got, so you guys need, I'm done. You need to tell me how you want to handle this. Do you want me to go to the county and tell them we're done? Do you want this to be modified? Do you want a county representative? Because my neck's sore from looking around.
Well, they want to add one, right? This says they want to add another one.
It would be a 15th deputy, half of which would be paid for by the
Lansing
county.
District has expressed interest in adding one school resource. So that tells me they already have one.
No, the process is, if this is approved, they go out, they first solicit volunteers. They're not gonna take, Sergeant Smith, who hates kids, and shove them in a school. It just doesn't work. They're gonna go to those officers and say, who's interested in this? Who thinks they would like to do this? Then they bring those candidates to the district and to the township to say, we'll go through an interview process and choose who we think is best suited for that job. But at this point, no, they don't have a person chosen.
No, but they're gonna have one in the spring, or
Yeah,
whatever.
their
In
hope
the
is to
fall,
have
when they
this.
go back to school.
Yeah,
They're gonna have one whether we vote yes or no on this.
I don't know that. All I know is they brought to us, hey, would you be willing to participate the same as your
I
peers?
bet everything I got
They-
that they will have somebody in that school.
Their agreement that the county approved today for recommendation to their full board is a contract with Lance Cruz that includes the 50% cost for 2 resource officers.
For two?
One at North and one at the high school.
Okay.
One with a separate agreement with Macomb Township, one with agreement with Harrison Township.
And last year was paid by,
Last year, they didn't have, in recent times, since I've been supervisor, to the best of my knowledge, they've not had deputies in our schools. They've had retired police officers that fill that role on a security basis. And to Mr. Tominello's point, in those circumstances, that individual was paid for by the school district. So, to your point, historically, they've paid for their liaison, their security person in their own budget.
liaison.
Right.
So I guess, I'm leaning with Mr. Tominello. I definitely think we should have somebody in the school. Whether we're gonna pay the 50% is an issue for me. These issues you've shown here look minimal to me, and I know you said, well, they have to go for every incident 2 or 4 times. To write reports and stuff, like, why are we paying, again, 140,000 or whatever? Not we, taxpayers, right? It seems very high. And again, I can't control what the school board does, whether they get an active deputy or whether they're retired, but I I would think if they were retired, they wouldn't have a $140,000 salary to handle a vape case or a,
But that would
Again, I-
mean not having, so what you're saying is not employ police officers.
yeah, it seems like it's a little excessive for the things that you listed there. Yes, when you have that incident where it's a computer hacker doing a bomb threat or whatever, they're gonna call in multiple officers, right? It's not just gonna be the one guy who's in the school, so again, we're still
We're
paying.
still gonna pay, because
Right.
those people are still gonna go there.
Yeah, but that, I mean, there is a cost to us providing police services anywhere.
In the
right?
community, I get that.
So, you know what I mean, like, that's a sunk cost. When they go see the little old lady that calls them every day because the guy next door is looking at her weird, you know what? That sucks, that they have to spend their day, you know what I mean, like, it's tough to say like, well, it's stupid that they have to go spend their money on, time on vape, it's really expensive.
Kroger doesn't reimburse us for police services, right? They don't say, hey, you know what, we've had a cop here several times because of larceny, here's our cost. So there, in other words, there is a responsibility if you're going to provide police services. You know, when we talk about saying, well, if we do an ice rescue, do we charge that person? Well, historically, we look at those kind of rescue services as saying, well, as soon as that leads someone not to make a call because they don't want to do it and a life is lost, do we really care about the $1.50 that we got for the ice rescue? So it's kind of a conundrum, like, you know, hey, you're engaging in foolish behavior, but providing public safety is one of those things that it's a blanket, it's something you provide. You don't discriminate or say, this person pays more or less, right?
See, I
So
think
that
this-
response to the school,
Right.
first of all, make sure you understand, this isn't my list.
No, I
Nothing
get
here
it.
was from me. Everything in your board packet, other than the agenda item, is from them. I'm saying to you, I can show you regular weekly run reports that I get from the sheriff's office that list the number of times they respond to our schools. And those responses number 2 to 4 every week.
And Ken, I know you're frustrated that none of us contacted you, but on the surface, when you read this at home, you're like, sounds like a good idea. I was a little concerned about the 50%, but figured we'd have this discussion tonight, enlightening each other, and I just think we needed it.
Sure, but my point is
Yeah.
if there was a, hey, I'm not sure, then I'd say, hey, you know what? Commander, why don't you come down, because you can probably answer some of those questions. He said, do you need me at the meeting? I said, well, nobody's even contacted me about it. With anything other than positive comments, I don't anticipate any difficulty. So my point is I want to provide that for you, but I don't want to make a guy come here after he worked all day and sit in the audience where there's no questions, because nobody has a problem with it. So I didn't mean that to be offensive to you. My point is if you're concerned, help me to provide what you need to make a decision, even if the decision is no. I'm sure Mr. Edoff would have been willing to attend and answer some of the questions that you have, so that it isn't me. But what's happening here is I'm negotiating against this board. I'm a member of this board. I did some of that research, I did some of that background work, I didn't anticipate a problem. So my point was, it's helpful to me if you say, you know, I've got some concerns. Will that person be here? Can they answer this question or not? Shame on me for not reaching out, but typically when there is something in the board packet that someone has a concern with, I can usually tell after doing this a dozen years, because I get calls, I get questions, I get emails, and I prepare accordingly. But there's nothing wrong with saying, in other words, you're not bound to agree to this because you didn't tell me something. I'm just saying I would have prepared different. That's all.
And this is based off a recommendation by the Macomb County Board of Commissioners also, correct?
Sheriff's Office, Board of Commissioners, School Board. And it's
So-
parallel to
so-
what
so
Macomb
what-
Township and Clinton
Right.
Township.
So again, to have a police officer, and I don't think there's a person on this board that doesn't agree we should have police in the school.
Sure.
It's the way it's being paid for. That's my stumbling block, I gotta tell you. Not that we shouldn't have police in schools. We should, we need them. But why do we have the residents paying for it? That's where I'm really hung up at.
Well, they kind of paying for it twice. Right?
No,
Because
no,
they're paying
no.
for school taxes, and they're
Right.
paying for,
Right, but
they're
half
paying
of,
for, you know, but I mean,
yeah.
it's like they're paying more than once.
Yeah, we're paying $2.4 million for 14 deputies, vehicles, and
Right.
dispatchers annually. $2.4 million. This is 70 grand more to provide what I believe is, what we all seem to agree is a good service.
But to Joe Smith that opened his tax bill, wow, look at their taxes for schools, and then, and now you're gonna pay for this too. They look at that as, we're paying twice.
We don't need to modify our millage rate to pay this. Our current
Yeah,
millage
that's
rate,
true.
right?
That's true.
Covers this cost.
Because it's a surplus. But if we can double that surplus, then we can get a 15th officer to be focused on the residents here in the township.
True, true.
So.
I think though, I think
So
what
we're
we're,
$70,000 away for having another officer. That's sort of the way I'm looking at it. And we're giving that 70,000 away for not really knowing what we're gonna get.
yeah, well, again,
Other than an officer in a school, which we all agree, there should be.
right. I would take exception for not knowing what we get. If you're concerned that there needs to be additional information in order for you to support this, I can put that additional information in. But if you're saying, I don't know what we're getting, I can clarify that. So don't, I guess what I'm saying is don't say, well, I'm unwilling to do this because I don't know what I'm getting.
Again, my stumbling block is how it's being paid for. Not that we don't need it, because I think we do, just how it's being paid for.
So would it be fair for me to say that regardless of how I might craft this agreement, as long as it's a 50%, you're a no?
That's correct.
Was that fair? Okay. Is there any reason I can't ask that same question of each of these individuals?
None whatsoever.
All right? If we can add a few lines to this, would you be a yes or a no?
That'll be a yes.
Okay? Paula?
If you can add the lines in about additional support, and I know what Larry was saying, sounds like we're really trying to manipulate the police department, but I kind of agree with him. Where most needed in the summer. We don't need them during the daytime hours, chances are. So
Yeah, but I don't know that, so
Yeah,
let me just
okay.
interrupt you there. As soon as I say, I don't want them from 7 to 3, I want them from 3 to 11, I'm assuming that I know more about providing police services in Harrison Township.
Right, that's where I said where most needed. So,
Sure.
I mean, I could live with this, with those couple of stipulations, only because I know it's gonna expire in 2.5 years, and then that board,
We can
which is
evaluate.
probably us,
It will be
can
us.
say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We'll have 2.5 years of history underneath
That's
our
right.
belts.
Correct.
And I go back to the fact that what Mr. Hu said, what is the value of presence? And I understand what Larry's saying in terms of how do you pay for it, but you know what? This is gonna be a massive egg on our face, and God forbid something were to happen in our community, and we were to, turn us down. We spend more than $70,000 on a backhoe, for God's sakes, for the DPW, and don't think anything of it. And I'm not saying we spend money recklessly, but you know what? Our responsibility is to the community to keep them as safe as possible. And that's my whole point. That's, I think, one of the most important things in my heart when I went up for election for the job, is that was one of the most important things. Try to have better public safety in the community. And however we get to going to that point and getting it done, I'm all open for different conversations, but at least it's a start somewhere.
Fair enough.
That's just,
So with certain amendments, you
I
might
could
be
support
supporting.
it.
I gotcha. Mr. Badkins?
I would, again, everybody agrees with having deputies in the school full-time. I would like to see it more of a percentage based on what we're going to get outside of school.
Sure, so I guess maybe that meant, let me ask the question this way. As long as it's a 50-50 split, you would be a no, or you'd be willing to consider it, or you'd be willing to consider it with modifications? Because,
If the modifications were right, I would be much easier drug along if it was more percentage based on, because we know how many weeks a year they're in school.
Mhm.
So I could look at the taxpayers and say, hey, we did a math problem close as we could, my personal opinion. We're gonna carry 16 weeks, 20, whatever that number is. And yeah, it only moves it 10 grand, but it's 10,000 bucks, whatever that is. So, and I did not take the time to go back and look at the school's budget to see what they carried for deputies,
they weren't deputies, but they were liaison officers.
liaisons,
Yeah.
right? Because for Macomb County Commissioners to say, oh yeah, let's do
Of
this.
course.
Yeah, here, you pay it.
Yeah.
We'll agree to it, but you pay it.
Yeah, so let's just say, to your point, Mr. Badkins, I don't think the fact that the county is agreeable to this arrangement is really persuasive either way, right? County Board of Commissioners has to approve any contracts that are associated with the county, but if they said, well, the school wants it and Macomb Township wants it, why would I say no to that? If the school wants it and Dakota wants it, why do I say no to that? Or I mean, Dakota and Macomb Township, right? So I agree, the county's agreement to this, I don't believe is persuasive. I do believe,
Hey, I like spending other people's money too, but I mean, come on,
sure.
that, what's fair is fair. And I don't want to discourage them to not have an officer in the school, but when that officer's not there, knowing that they're out on patrol, yes, it may be minimal, but we're gonna have data by the time we look at this a year, 2 years down the road, and be able to make a good decision then.
Right.
And maybe we put that on the sheriff's department, we want tracking on how many times we have somebody else in that school.
Mhm.
And we just, and make maybe a better decision. Maybe this is the right decision right now, I'm just saying, but more information is sometimes better.
So let me ask you this. Would you be willing to take a 2.5-year gamble, so to speak, and agree to a 50% split with an acknowledgement that we would need greater data at the end, when 2024 comes, to know whether 50% is the right split or not? In other words, would you be willing to accept the fact that, in the interest of kind of going along with what we know our peers have done in multiple communities with multiple departments, okay, we'll take a gamble on 2.5 years, but I'm gonna need to see data before I agree to paying 50% further down the road?
Yeah, and I think that, yes, I think my answer to that would be yes, but the school district has to understand when this data comes back, if we're taking all these people off the road, hey, we're not gonna pay half, we're gonna pay a third, we're gonna pay a quarter.
Right.
So they have to understand as well that this data is gonna drive the number. Maybe we're spot on right now, but I think it would be much easier sell for myself if that were the case.
So, again, long-term, in order to renew this sometime, you might want, no, not might, you'd certainly want to see data to support the split.
Yep.
In the interest of getting this in place and avoiding any delays and providing a level of protection, would you be willing to agree to a 50-50 for 2.5 years?
Yeah, once we see how it's written, yeah, and I will
Yeah.
do some more homework and understand what the school district's dealing with the budget. I'm gonna look that up.
Sure.
To see if they've got financing for 100% of it, because again, it's just, I didn't do my due diligence on this. I'm gonna echo that with everybody else. Sounded like a great idea, sounded pretty simple, but, we start talking, get a couple different perspectives.
Yeah, and that's
I think
okay.
it's good dialogue.
Absolutely, yeah, this
As
isn't,
long as our kids are safe, whatever we need, we'd spend every dollar we got in the general fund if we knew we had to protect the kids,
absolutely,
right?
there's no, yeah, nobody, right, there's always a way you can twist the argument to say, well, what's the price? Oh, well, sure, but the same thing, someone said one time, when it comes to public safety officers, you can't pay them enough. There are definitely days when someone gives their life or experiences injury or trauma, and on that day, you can't pay them enough. But the reality is, there's a finite amount that you can pay anybody in order to be responsible with taxpayer dollars, so we look at comparables and things like that.
Yep.
This is that same thing. Yeah, there's no price to put on that level of safety, but the reality is, we're not putting 50 officers in every school. It's just not a practical solution, even though that might make things safer. So there is that balance. So, okay. Mr. Brado, can you tell me where you fall?
I think with the right amendments, I could support it, but I would not support it unless it was a separate contract. It's
Okay.
gotta be an isolated contract, it's an isolated situation. If Kroger came to us and said, we need a police officer full-time in our store, I'd want an isolated contract for them too.
Okay.
It can't just be lumped into everything else, because then there's no way to really track how effective this really is. And
Well, that's more so on the data side. I mean,
Yes,
the
and honestly-
entire contract, their contract is 100% standard and will not change anything in it.
But
other than
honestly,
the
I look at this situation as there's a police officer in Lance Cruz versus at the mini station. So I don't look at it as, what are we getting for our money? They're protecting a lot of people over there, but that one person cannot protect hundreds of kids. They're still gonna be bringing people that we're already paying for anyway. So I really think in order to track this effectively, it needs to be a separate contract. It can't be grouped in everything else.
Let me just go back to what you just said. There is no way that I can tell you, or anyone could tell you, that the presence of a deputy at the high school will result in no calls to our road patrols.
Right.
But I can assure you that the presence of that deputy will result in a reduced number of
Sure.
road calls.
No, I agree with that.
Because certain routine things that require a report are gonna be handled by that deputy.
Right.
We'll never hear it from dispatch.
Right.
Our officers, our 14 officers, will respond less to the schools. We can't dispute that.
I'm not talking about everyday
Right.
run.
I'm saying I'm not saying it's
Someone
never
broke
gonna
my
happen.
locker. I'm not talking about that kind of stuff. I'm talking about something major.
Correct, but that's true anywhere. That's true for any facility, any marina, any incident that could occur anywhere. The point is if we assigned a deputy to Kroger, we would have less calls from the rest of the deputies responding to Kroger, because that deputy is gonna handle a certain quantity of those cases. We know this is, the high school is a hot spot. When you look at the report, when he's,
Pleasantries calls us and said, man, you know, I got millions over here, I need a deputy, you know,
But I
what are
think
we gonna say?
I think it's weird, I think it's weird to, I mean, you can't compare a private business to a public
I'm
serving.
using these
I know, but
analogies
it's a
because
bad analogy
they're-
because it really falls
they're
apart
not really-
quickly.
They're not really bad analogies.
No, no, but I think it's a different, you're serving a private good versus a public good. And that's where this really is different. But I think, to your point about wanting
And I agree
different-
with the serving the public good.
But I
agree
think,
with that.
but I
We all
think, but I think to your point about wanting different data, they actually have, I mean, the sheriff's office has actually a pretty robust data gathering and reporting system, and I think we can ask for better data for this officer in particular.
yep,
And I think that accomplishes a lot of what you're saying, because I don't think a separate contract, like, I hear what you're saying, and I think I understand what you're looking for, but I don't think a separate contract is gonna give you anything different.
right, they can provide data without modifying the contract. When all is said and done, this comes down to a function of, I'm sure at least in some part, some level of liability. Whose officer is this, right?
Right.
It's a shared officer between the school and the community that they serve in. So a deal breaker for you is having a separate contract, and I understand that. But if it were a separate contract, and at least to make sure that I understand, when we talk about other things, one was a marked car,
Yes,
and one was written assurance that the deputy would otherwise be assigned to Harrison Township when they're not assigned to the school.
sure, yep.
And then the analytics, right?
Well, so here's the key. If someone said, hey, I need data on the number of runs to the school, this list that we have before us is not reflective of the number of runs. That list is reflective of the number of runs that require time above and beyond the report. So if I show up to your home because someone stole your car, I'm gonna be there for, I don't know, half hour, 45 minutes, could be more or less depending on the circumstances. When I get a report that they ran there and there was a minor in possession at the school, there's a finite amount of time. The higher, and I'm not qualified to talk about, but the higher that criminal, like a criminal sexual conduct charge, is probably gonna result in a greater level of investigation, coordinating with the prosecutor and possibly the court system in pursuit of that. And that all happens, I mean, you're not doing it for free. So if I'm the guy who took that report, I'm the guy going to the courtroom. I'm the guy working with, or the lady working with the prosecutor. I think they chose those cases. But the consistently highest location where runs occur during the school season is L'Anse Creuse High School. That's our number one spot.
So just a question. Would it be proper to go back to the sheriff's department and say, look, you know, we think this is a good idea again, I stress again, I think all of us feel this is a good idea, but, sort of getting back to Mr. Batkins, we're gonna give you 30%, not 50%. And see what they say. You know what? It still may be a bargain for them. And that may be more reflective of the services we're gonna get from that police officer. The only thing they're gonna say is, no, it ain't gonna work, but why wouldn't we do that? I mean, it's a negotiation, why wouldn't we do that?
Well,
Because it's 30% more than they're getting today. Just a thought.
I'm asking specifically, I am comfortable, in order to continue this conversation with the sheriff's office and the school district, to look at a 50% split for 2.5 years with an evaluation further down the road. I'm not going back, I'm not haggling with them. You wanna haggle with them, you can call them up and you can haggle with them. If Clinton Township, Macomb Township, and undoubtedly other neighbors, I didn't bring you reams of data on what everybody does because I didn't anticipate this problem, but those are two that I just happen to know, are doing this at a 50%, I felt comfortable saying, well, what's different about Harrison Township than 200,000 of our Macomb County neighbors and the way they pay for the police service at their schools? So I'm comfortable with 50%. If the goal is Ken go back and haggle, I mean, it's okay, but I'm not doing it. But I will go back and ask for some modifications to this and try to seek some sort of a consensus in that regard. So, just to clarify, David, if we had a separate contract, the marked car assigned to Harrison Township, other than the school, you could support the 50% for 2.5 years.
Yes.
Mr. Witt?
Yeah, unfortunately, I think there's a lot of different ways, you know, you could look at this and say like, we're losing $1 here and gaining $1 there, but you're never gonna put 100% point on it. We don't sit here, when we get our sheriff's contract, we don't go, well, what time are they doing mutual aid to Mount Clemens? Because Mount Clemens owes us for that. We say that's sort of the cost of doing business, and that's
And the ability to have 3 guys that can come from Mount Clemens when we got a problem.
right.
Right?
But we
It's
don't,
mutual aid. We don't keep score on automatic aid when we respond to a structure fire in Mount Clemens. We just do it because they do it for us.
right. And unfortunately, I mean, I do feel like the school's shifting some of the cost, but when you look at your peers and you're running into that, like, how much different am I gonna be? It's tough to be anything different. I think they would make good points about, I really appreciated Mr. Huth's point about a marked car on site. If that's, what makes the difference, I think that should be important.
Yeah, there's value there. And that might already be, it's very possible that they've already taken it into account because they're familiar with that data, but it doesn't hurt to say that's what we want.
I know every time there's a car there, I slow down.
That's right, anywhere, right? Yeah.
And then clarifying that they're assigned to Harrison Township outside of school hours because it defines them as a school resource officer. I don't want them sitting at the school in the summer, and I don't think that was the intent.
No.
But to clarify in a contract, that's what contracts are for, to set expectations as to what we receive, so I think that makes sense.
Great. So then, the next step would be, whether that happens or not, I'm hearing a majority of support with some modifications. Is there a willingness to entertain a motion to that effect tonight, so that I can go back to them saying, listen, my board, I'm either gonna go back to the sheriff's office in the school district and say, I think I might have support for this if we make these changes, only to find that we don't. So, is there a willingness to make a motion dependent upon these things tonight, or is there, because it's a completely different thing if I go back and say, you know what, I got approval from the board if we add these 2 lines, and this is a separate contract. Okay, good, we'll drop a separate contract. Versus saying, well, I polled everybody and they were mostly in support of this, can we make all these changes? And then I come back in 2 weeks and we say, no, I don't think I can do it. So I'm asking then, is there a willingness to make a motion dependent on these 3,
Contingent on.
contingent on these 3 modifications?
Yeah, I'm comfortable doing that if there's, people, I mean, I don't care about the third one of adding a separate contract, but if that's what makes people comfortable, I'm okay with it.
Right. And I'll just say, David, and I want to make sure you understand, they may come back and say, we're unwilling to do that, and that might change how you vote, right? So,
Right.
I can't, I have 0 problem about saying I need a marked car. I can't imagine they're gonna say, no, we are unwilling to do it.
Well, the only thing with the
They've
market-
committed to saying that they're gonna put this person on.
Yeah, they have to
during
get
the summer.
from the high school to middle school south, to middle school central somehow, they're not walking.
Correct, right. The sheriff made it clear, literally himself, he made it clear that in order to make this work, they didn't include the cost of a car in the cost of the deputy, because they know that they have pool cars that they can utilize for this purpose. And when I say pool cars, I don't mean like a Dodge Dart. I'm talking about a sheriff's vehicle, lights, sirens, the whole thing. But it might not, like, they have certain cars that say Harrison Township on them, assigned to Harrison Township, Mount Clemens. They have other vehicles that are pool cars, or they might be, hey, this one was in repair, it's available, give that to the liaison officer, give that to the deputy at the school, kind of thing. So he explained it to me that they have enough vehicles that they can figure out how to put 2 on these without itemizing that as the cost. I'm comfortable I can get those 2 done. I am not comfortable that I can get the separate contract. You think so? Okay,
Yeah.
good. Well, then I'm comfortable now, because the attorney thinks so. So would you be willing to make that motion, Mr. Wood?
Are we approving it, or are we directing the supervisor to get that and bring back? I guess would be.
Yeah, but let me just say this, again, just so that you.
No, I wanna make sure that the
I don't
board's
wanna
on
go
the
through
same
this childbirth in 2 weeks. If we either are willing to do this, this isn't, we're talking about a lot of little details, but this is pretty simple. It's 70 grand for the next 2.5 years.
I understand, I just wanna make sure 7 of us are on the same page.
Right, so I'm asking for permission to authorize the supervisor to execute this agreement with these 3 modifications. Because after talking about this I'm sure in excess of an hour. Those are really, I mean, there's a, don't misunderstand it. There's a principled argument you're making, and I don't think you're crazy for making it. I might disagree with it, but I don't think I can put something in here to say it's less than that, right? I'm not prepared to negotiate. I would be uncomfortable saying, hey, look, you know, again, a quarter of Macomb County agreed to pay for their police officers this way, but we're different here in Harrison Township. If I can't see the data to support it in 2.5 years, I might say, no, I'm not willing to participate because this really isn't paying off for us. I'd rather use that 70 grand, put another 70 to it and assign an officer directly here because that's a better deal for us. But I am comfortable giving this a shot and saying I'm going to need data in 2.5 years when that time comes. So my point is I think it's fair for me to ask for a motion to authorize the supervisor to work with the attorney to exercise this agreement with those three requirements.
So I just put it to authorize the supervisor to execute an agreement, so with the intent that it would be a separate agreement, but personally, I don't want that to be the stumbling block. I feel Rob felt comfortable, so that's okay.
I'm okay with that too.
With Macomb County Sheriff's Office adding the clauses that require a marked car and that the officer is assigned to Harrison Township outside of normal school days.
Right, so that would be your motion?
Yes.
Okay. Is there support for that motion?
I'll support the motion.
We had a fair amount of discussion, we may have some public comment, but before I look to public comment, I'll ask if there's further board comment.
I think with the items that we're talking about, I know there's a motion on the floor. You know, we probably should have come to a somewhat of a consensus, pencil in the changes, and brought the sheriff in 2 weeks and had a conversation with him. Okay, because obviously we've spent an hour and a half talking about this. It's pretty important near to dear to everybody's heart. So, but that's not the motion. So that's just my comment.
Okay. Any other board comment? Is there public comment? Seeing no public comment, we'll close the floor for public comment. We've got a motion by Mr. Witt with support by Mr. Oljati. We've discussed it at length. I don't know that is there any further discussion?
I just really not being clear on the changes. I'm just, I know what's written down. We talked vaguely about 3 items of sheriff's car, separate contract, and some language about guaranteeing that this person, but we didn't talk about the percentage of funds, right?
I've said, I'm not doing that. I'm saying, and I'm not trying to be obstinate, but I am, at this point, I am not comfortable haggling over 10 grand over this issue. That, to me, is,
Well, we don't know what's.
Well, and here's the thing.
well, I mean, if I do the math, I'm pretty much within 10 grand of saying, I don't think this is a 50-50 split. I get that. I understand that.
That was one of the first things you said.
Right.
So if it's not 50-50, we shouldn't be paying 50.
No, that's not true. That's not, well, let me say that. That's not what I believe. What I'm saying is there's inherently, for me, an argument as to whether or not putting a police officer is inherently the school's responsibility versus the township's responsibility. So my point is, since I can't necessarily nail that down, it's hard to determine whether 50% is the right split. Will this person be serving exclusively Harrison Township and not the school 50% of his or her time? No. But is he or she serving Harrison Township while they're in the school? Yes. And will they sometimes respond outside of the school? Yes. But if I strictly look at 12 weeks in the summer, 2 weeks at Christmas, 1 week at Easter break, and a handful of days that the school is closed, no, I can't get to 26 weeks where this person is assigned to our mini station. But will they reduce the load on the mini station? Yes. Will they serve the residents of Harrison Township the entire time that they're at the school? Yes. For that reason, I can't get to that number. It's too abstract for me to be able to say it's exactly 48.6%. So for that reason, considering, again, the majority of residents served in townships by cops doing the same arrangement, 200,000 folks said this is fair. I don't see where we're any different. So the percent, that's why I said, the qualifier was, Are you supportive of this at 50%? I'm not modifying that. Someone else wants to go and tackle with the sheriff and Eric, that's okay. So for clarification, the motion is at 50%, right? Do you understand that? Does anyone wish a roll call, or do you want a voice vote? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
Nay.
I heard a 5-2, so it doesn't matter. Right, I know.
Say motion carried.
Right, I know that, but I'm saying, just for whatever it's worth, I know in the minutes don't reflect that, and I don't need them to reflect that, but I'm comfortable that I heard a majority. All right, thank you, Board. And again, regardless of whether you're for or against, we're all for the concept. I think we might not have been comfortable with some of the terms of the arrangement, and I respect that, but I appreciate the effort and passion debate. Next on our agenda is our weed harvester. Board members, we acquired a weed harvester back in 1999. The records indicate that it came from the Michigan State Department of Natural Resources, and the vessel is titled in our name, Harrison Township. It was used to remove weeds from canals in the 90s and early 2000s, but we learned that it cannot be used in Lake St. Clair. Since then, a lot of the waterfront communities, I should say a lot, some of the waterfront communities have chosen to treat the weeds in other various ways. And so we have not operated that probably since 04, 05, 06.
I think before that.
No, it was 2005.
No, because Tony was in office.
2005, I think, was the last time we tried to use it.
I know Tony was supervisor, so.
The DNR came out and, I don't know if there were guns out, but they pretty strongly said, do not do
Yeah,
that.
they were actually filtering in the bay.
Right.
Yeah.
In Camp Out Bay.
Camp Out Bay.
Yeah. So we haven't used it since approximately 2005. We loaned it to the Metro Parks for use at Stony Creek to clean, they used it to clean their lakes, but they have not used the weed harvester in many years. It's been stored at Lake St. Clair Metro Park, but there is a project underway to improve access to the marsh, and where they currently have their equipment yard is right along the marsh. And at the time when the beach was developed, people thought, that's just a swamp, everyone wants to go to the beach, but we're finding that people like the marsh and access to that waterway. So they're improving that shoreline, moving their yard, asked us to come and get the weed harvester. We moved the harvester, and there's also goes with it is a conveyor that's used to haul the weeds. So basically the harvester picks up the weeds, goes to the shore, a conveyor pulls those weeds off and offloads them onto land. But it's stored at Station 1, can't leave it there, so it's temporary storage. I've checked with DNR staff, no one can provide any direction regarding what we can do with it. I'm asking for permission to list it for sale and to authorize the three full-time officials to sell it with the details to come back before the board once it is sold.
I'll make that motion.
Support.
Any discussion on the motion?
No, just many other states use those, so,
Up north, there's up north lakes.
Yep, so
You can get a homeowners
Yep.
association that wants it, right?
yep, and if we leave it sit there much longer, it's
Yeah.
gonna be junk. It's gonna be trash.
Yeah,
And I will say I saw a listing for one maybe a year older from 3 years ago, and they just had a reserve of $5,000. So,
Yeah, I mean,
you
we're
know, what I
not-
mean, like it's
we're not
not
getting
a
a
big
lot,
dollar
but
amount
it's-
just to set.
my guess is it's one of two buyers. It's gonna be somebody out, like you say, outstate, whether it's up north or another part of the country.
Down south could be as well.
Correct, correct, yep. Or it's good, you know, maybe a contractor that does that kind of work, or it's gonna be a marine contractor, because it is a big old,
Oh, it's huge.
it's a big dog,
It's
so.
huge. It's huge.
I did send an email to the guy that we reached out about treating canals and said, hey, this might be available, are you guys interested? Just to like,
Yeah, yeah.
try and figure it out, because
Yeah, 'cause
there isn't a Craigslist for, you know.
It's a
aquatic
unicorn.
It's,
cars.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's time to go.
It's an
If we-
ugly unicorn.
If we thought selling a Vector was hard.
Yeah, that's right, yeah, so. All right, any other discussion on the motion? Hearing none and seeing no public comment, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carries. Thank you, board. Next on our agenda is public comments. We'll open the floor for public comments. We ask that you try to limit your comments to 5 minutes in length.
Board members, residents, C. William Bardell, 25-year resident, clean cut, do-gooder boy next door, clean up, fix up, people helping people. Just want to remind everyone to please check out Save Lake St. Clair on Facebook, follow, find out everything that's going on. I'd like to comment a little bit about the maintenance of this building. I've been asking the board to tuck point these windows, get these windows detailed out, and get them tuck pointed. I can tell your heating system or your cooling system probably has needs the condenser coil cleaned, so that's got to be maintained. Also, I want to talk a little bit about the 2020 election. This board was handpicked because you guys all got your picture taken together. You guys made signs together. You guys had front page ads in the C&G newspaper that came in every week or every other week. I know it was COVID, so they did it every other week. You had it reserved. You guys all had your pictures taken all together, and you were endorsed by chairman of the board. Okay, all of you. Your hand-picked board right here. So, could be your church, initiated by Ken Verkest, our supervisor. And I don't believe that's fair. I don't think it's right. Ken also had his henchmen in the water department and in the ordinance department take signs and dispose of the signs. They didn't take signs and call you up and tell you to come pick up your signs. Those signs are $6.67 each at least. Very expensive. But again, when you're dealing with a monopoly and not a democracy, this is what you get. So good luck, fellow board members. Good luck, residents. And we'll try to get through this. Thank you for listening.
Thank you.
Good evening, board. I'll try and make it short. Over the weekend, this township was blanketed by a group of people, a company that hired them, to go around and go up to people's doors, knock on them, even if there was no solicitation. They had company, they were putting their kids to bed, up until 8 o'clock or later. And the residents were told it was about the low-income housing. Lansing had billions of dollars or millions of dollars, and we have to have it in this township. Now, my question is, when they came to my house, I asked if they had a permit. They said, oh, yes. I said, okay. So where? Couldn't show it to me. So I just said, thank you very much, and shut the door. I would like to know what this company was, who pulled the permit, who was behind this company. Was it the investment company that plans to make money on the so-called low-income housing and the destruction of the neighborhood of Ballard? And who authorized like to know that. So, I mean, it was very disturbing. And one of the residents on the street behind me told me that as they walked away, she heard him say, "Oh, don't go to these 4 houses, they're all union." Another one said they knew my mother's name. They wanted to know where she was. This creeped people out. So, it's not a coincidence, fairly recent, because it's only been a week since that special meeting. So if you could please enlighten me as to who pulled the permit, who authorized it, and why are they coming up to places that have no solicitation, going away, coming back, and ringing doorbells? This is not right. We have enough junk with the, the junky select newspaper from the Free Press that just people are sick of and they leave it in the road. I really would like to see this be a no solicitation township. If you want something, send me a card. But that is my opinion. But as far as the other, I would really like to know who authorized this permit, why, and who is the sponsor of it. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no other public comment, we'll close the floor for public comment, move back to board comment. Resident suggested that the compressor, or the condenser coils are plugged. Actually, the compressor failed on our air conditioning unit on Friday. I met with the repair person Saturday morning for service. He determined that the compressor itself needs to be replaced. It's been ordered, and he gave us about a 50% chance of being able to do it tonight, and I think it was less than that. So, but we did order it. And,
About 30%?
yes, close to 0. I don't know. It's about 16 out of 52 apparently. So either way, so we do have a compressor on order, but again, it's indicative of older things that just need service sometimes. I have to just categorically and blanket deny any claim made that I direct people or henchmen to do things. I have not targeted anybody. I don't direct people to take out signs. We have an ordinance department and they do the work they do. So I'm sorry that the resident lost some signs, but I had nothing to do with it, have no knowledge of it, and never have I directed someone to specifically take someone's sign down. Another resident asked whether we could, perhaps I or we can enlighten them as to who might be soliciting. I no more can enlighten you on that than I can tell you.
I can probably talk to some of it.
Sure, and I was going to direct you to that. But I know nothing of that. I don't. That doesn't come to me. So maybe you can say who it was and whether or not they had a permit. I don't know that it's possible to. Can we prohibit solicitation in the township? Is it possible to pass an ordinance that says you cannot solicit?
Some speech yes, some speech no.
So we do have an ordinance that allows for residents to put a no solicitation sign. Anyone that is a licensed vendor is not allowed to knock on that individual's door.
Gotcha.
So this board, already has that ordinance in effect. I will say, and I don't know specifically who knocked on anyone's doors at any given time, so I can't say if it was one of these 2 organizations, but we have been contacted by 2 organizations. One was Clean Water Action. They annually go out and do like a survey, door-to-door kind of knocking. Yeah. And then there's also the Working America Community Canvas. They're associated with the AFL-CIO. Both those items are protected free speech for those organizations to go door to door because they're not soliciting anything. I believe the Attorney General has an opinion out that governs that, that says those types of door to door encounters are not something that falls under solicitation, and it can't be controlled by the municipality because free speech in this country is given such a wide breadth. And
So that would be the some speech that you can't prevent solicitation.
Yes.
Gotcha. And I can only guess. So when you'd said, well, they seem to know information, the fact is that there's tons of information about everyone
Well, yeah,
else,
like the
right?
old Bruster's book.
Yeah, so oftentimes organizations like that, they purchase what they call walking lists, and they'll say, this home is a a union home, this home is a Democrat home, this home is a Republican home. The people in this home hunt or fish because they use Freedom of Information Act to acquire who applied for a fishing license and how often they vote, whether they vote in an election. Not something that I understand, but the point is that there are companies that harvest that data, whatever they can, organize that in specialized lists, so sometimes someone's coming to your home, knows a lot of the things that might already be public knowledge,
It's
so.
just that it was all about the Ballard project, and they blanketed the township.
Well, no one has come in saying they wanted to talk about the Ballard project or apply for a permit for that, have they?
No, sir.
Okay. So, again, I can't answer that question. If somebody was doing that, I can tell you this. The individual who's working on the housing project on Ballard Street had spoken with me after that last meeting, and he had shared with me the fact that one of the residents who spoke at the meetings said publicly, "You haven't even talked to the people in the neighborhood. Have you gone door to door?" And he said, "No, I haven't." And so he committed to that, and he told me that he was going to go door to door to talk to the neighbors in that area to explain what that project is. Now, whether or not through social media, someone who did that on one street misinterpreted that on another, I don't know that. I can't comment on that, but I can tell you that the individual told me that he probably talked to 30 people around where the project was, plus or minus
Yes,
Ballard.
he did, but
So-
this was.
Yeah, I'm not gonna engage in a back and forth, I'm
No,
just trying to
I
answer your question.
understand that, but I
can't
understand
speak to
that.
that.
It was the whole township, from Jeremiah to the center, to the south end, it was all over.
Gotcha. But that's the best answer I can give you. We can't prevent solicitation, but we can enact some limits to it. We have done that. Don't know who it was, but could be one of these two individuals that had permits.
Thank you.
That's it. So, any other board comment? Hearing none, I'd be looking for a motion to adjourn.
Make that motion.
All right, I'm gonna take a second from Mrs. Rose, if that's okay. I heard both, so a motion by Mr. Bankins, with support by Mrs. Rose. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Those opposed, motion carries, meeting adjourned. Thank you.